Excellent. Hi, Kent. We waited for you.
Thank you.
Kent was just finishing up with a Boy Scout group we were both working with.
They had a lot of questions.
They did, and I was surprised. Okay, and if we're all ready, off we go. Okay, it is the City Council regular meeting. It's 6:30 p.m. Tuesday, January 4th, 2022. I can't believe it. And meeting accessibility. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-28, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to listen to the virtual City Council meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public and public comment is able to be submitted. The city is now using Zoom webinar to host its public meetings. To join the Zoom webinar on the web, use https://zoom.us/i/977-434-76957. By telephone, dial 253-215-8782 and enter the following webinar ID when prompted: 977-4347-6957#. To view live, the city website is www.sammamish.us/TV21. The city YouTube or Comcast Channel 21 within Sammamish only. To view later, the meeting videos are available the day after the meeting. Again, the city website is www.sammamish.us/TV21 on the city YouTube or Comcast Channel 21 within Sammamish only. Lita, would you please do the roll call?
Mayor Karen Moran.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Christy Malchow.
Present.
Councilmember Kaylee Clark.
Present.
Councilmember Ken Gamblin.
Present.
Councilmember Karen Howe.
Present.
Councilmember Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Here.
Excellent. Pledge of Allegiance. Amy, would you please start us off?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent. Okay, first thing we have is the welcoming of our new council members. We had the council members were sworn in on Wednesday, December 22nd, and I'm going to list them off. So I'm going to ask for those council members if you can kind of wave who you are as I list them through. Council member Amy Lamb was newly elected to position number 1. And then myself, who was elected to position number 3, re-elected. And then Councilmember Kaylee Clark, if she can wave, yay, to position number 5. And then Councilmember Karen Howe, there she is, was newly elected to position number 7. So excellent. Okay, that takes us on to, we are going to be electing our mayor and deputy mayor this evening. And the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to ask for nominations, and then the council member. Well, I'll go through it as we do it. So first thing we've got is nominations for mayor. Okay, so wow, I'm gonna see all sorts of hands. Okay, council member Treen.
So I nominate Karen Moran.
Okay, council member Lamb.
I nominate Deputy Mayor Christy Malchow.
Councilmember Howe.
You're on mute, Karen.
I don't think I need to nominate again, but it would be Christy Malchow also.
Okay, and then, nope, you don't have to if it's already up.
Right.
Okay, and then, okay, so that was it. Okay. So we've got just the 2. Okay. Okay, so we're going to do it in the order of which they were presented. So it would be all those in favor of Councilmember Moran, say, well, actually, let's just
We
do
need to do a roll call vote for the rules.
I'm going to ask, it says for both, so I'm going to ask to say aye and to raise your hand so we can see both. Thank you. All those in favor of Councilmember Moran, if you could say aye, but also if you could do a hand so I can see both, because it's hard for me to tell otherwise. All those in favor of Councilmember Moran, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and all those in favor of Councilmember Melchow?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Councilmember Melchow will be the new mayor.
Thank you, Council. The next order of business is the election of the deputy mayor. So I'll ask for nominations from the floor. Councilmember Lamb.
I nominate Councilmember Kaylee Clark.
Are there any other nominations before I close the nominations? Okay, seeing none, then as a formality, all those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand for Councilmember Kaylee Clark for deputy mayor.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, by a vote of 7-0, our new deputy mayor is Councilmember Kaylee Clark. Congratulations. Okay. Next order of business is approval of the agenda. I'd entertain a motion. If someone just wants to move the agenda.
I move that we accept the agenda as is.
In a second.
Second.
Thank you. Okay, the agenda has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, our agenda is approved. Our next order of business is we have a pre-legislative session meeting with our state legislators. Mr. City Manager, I'll turn this over to you.
Mike, Sugg is going to lead us through this. Yeah. Mike, would you recommend we wait?
Yes, Mayor Malchow, members of the council, we have conveyed to our legislators that this portion of the agenda would start at 7 p.m. So if there's something that we can do on the agenda beforehand, maybe that's an option.
There is, thank you, Mike. So I think I might suggest that we start public comment since that's the next order of business. However, Mike, feel free to chime in if we're in the middle of not executive session, of public comment, and we get to 7 o'clock when we're expecting our legislators on the line. We may kind of bifurcate public comment if there's still additional commenters and take the rest of them after the legislative session, just to be respectful of the time of our legislators, if that's okay with everybody on the council.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, thank you. So Lita, I'll turn it over to you on the public commenters who's present.
One moment, please. If you would wish to provide public comment, please raise your hand. For attendees who are joining by phone, please raise your hand by pressing *9.
So we're giving folks just a moment to raise their hand for public comment. I will read that. Pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-28, the city is unable to provide an in-person location for the public to comment at the virtual city council meeting this evening. Meetings are still accessible to the public and the public comment is able to be submitted. Written public would need to be in by 5 p.m. the day of the meeting. You submit your written comment to the city clerk, L. Hashi at sammamish.us, and to the city council at sammamish.us. We do allow for up to 3 minutes of verbal public comment provided per person.
Okay.
I'll let you go ahead and
Yes.
read whoever's.
I see that we have 6 people who have raised their hands for public comment tonight. I will unmute the callers in the order they have raised their hands. When it's your turn to speak, you will be converted to a panelist and be unmuted so you can turn on your webcam if desired. Please note, during this conversion, it will feel like you have been removed from the meeting. Please wait a few seconds and you will return. You will have 3 minutes to provide public comment. 15 seconds before your 3 minutes is complete, I will provide a time warning. At 3 minutes, you will be muted and converted back to an attendee. Please start your comment by stating your name and the city you live in for the record. I will now unmute the first caller. Carrie Bosworth.
Hi, good evening. My name is Carrie Bosworth, Sammamish resident of almost 4 years. I'll keep this short tonight. I just want to welcome our new city council members this evening, Amy Lamb, Kaylee Clark, Karen Howe. Welcome, and I also want to say thank you to the existing and current city council members for your time and commitment to our city as well. I just have one other point this evening, and that is to briefly talk about the Sammamish Farmers Market. It's many months away, but I would love and hope that it is on your agenda to get that going. I had a great time last year. I met people for the first time, so that was fun. We had great food, loved the music, brought my puppy to socialize with her a bit. I really hope that we are on top of that so that we're not waiting to the last minute, and I really hope that we allow the Sammamish Chamber of Commerce to do it as well. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, if I could. Hey, Carrie?
Yeah.
Is she gone?
Yep.
Carrie, how many times would you say that you've actually gone to the farmer's market?
Last year, I think I went 4 times.
Okay. And did you have a sense of that there was a variety of Sammamish businesses there or sponsors? What was your perception of Sammamish?
It looked like people were having a lot of fun. A real lot. Families were there. We were all eating. People were laughing. There was great music. It was really, really joyous. So we really had a good time.
Thank you so much.
I will now unmute the next caller. Ramir Valderrama. You're muted.
Okay, hold on. Let me see there. All right. I'm former Deputy Mayor Ramiro Valderrama. Thank you all. The executive summary investigation into the reported concerns involving the city manager that it's now in the public hands alludes to the questionable action by council members, plural. These all need to be identified by name, and other members of the family members of the city manager. The summary also reports to the extensive forwarding of confidential information by family members from the city manager to citizen who's a prolific blogger on the Sammamish comment. Given the extensive abuses, the citizen blogger and family members in the handling of this information, all violators should be barred from any further contact with council members, and any contact with council members should be publicly reported and documented. Now, today you have elected a new ceremonial mayor. The council members should seriously consider that on the agenda today is the investigation into the city manager. Yet it was cited in public comment by Citizen Scholes on November 16, 21, that the investigation was initiated by Deputy Mayor Christy Malchow, and that this investigation, as you know, focused on violations of mishandling of confidential data and ethics. Yet in public comments, Scholes also further cited that he had received confidential data that he should not have from Malchow and other council members, and said that he had dined with all of them except Stewart. all of you are guilty of what Dave is being condemned for. In fact, it has become known that Deputy Mayor Malchow has reportedly been mishandling against state law confidential information. For example, PRR 4053 cites that on January 21, Mickey Muller wrote to Michael Scholes, "I have seen the emails where Christie shares she sent you information from executive session," the exact thing that we got Pam censured for. I have also other communications between Mueller, Malchow, and citizens discussing city confidential business. Malchow and others are constantly and knowingly sharing city confidential information with multiple people across the city. These are all actions against state laws and ethics, and Deputy Mayor Malchow and other council members, Moran, Gamble, and Treen, should be cited, should they have been cited for having similar actions, should all be subject to full investigation opened against them and similar sanctions be put against them for sharing of confidential information in violation.
15 seconds.
So to not do so would be a dereliction of your trust and duty to the citizens of the state. You all need to hold those members accountable and hold the ethics of the city to a higher standard than what it's been today. Release the full report unredacted for our citizens. Thank you all.
I will now unmute the third caller. Jan Bird.
There we go. Okay, good evening, Council. I'd first like to welcome our new council members and thank you for your willingness to serve the community. And tonight, I want to comment on two things. One is the farmers market proposal. Last year, the staff spent time doing a request for proposals to allow vendors to apply to run and operate the farmers market. We got one response. It was from the Sammamish Chamber of Commerce, who established the first market in 2007 and done it ever since. I would not waste further staff time doing another request for proposals. Let's have the chamber do it again. It was successful last year, and you know, as always, and it's a great community building event. I think we should give them $5,000 and be upfront with both the staff and the chamber about what the expectations are for the financial record keeping requirements. If the record keeping is done well, go for $10,000 the next year. Also this year, we should be providing the garbage service and also do the advertising like we used to do. The city has already admitted to run it themselves would be cost prohibitive, but probably run at a loss due to the need to hire more staff. It would take at least a year to get up and running. This is going to be true of any other vendor who would apply. So at this point, I think we're getting a bargain. And if you remember at your 2020 retreat, some of you that were there, when your facilitator told you you had a dysfunctional relationship with the Chamber of Commerce and you need to fix it, he said this was just not a normal thing for a city to do. So here's your opportunity to do just that. Otherwise, it makes the council and the city look rather petty and mean-spirited. This year, let's do the right thing so we can all enjoy the market as a community. My second issue is I would ask that the council release the facts and findings of the full investigation into the investigation regarding the city manager. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We now have a phone caller. You're muted.
Hi, this is Mary Wichter, and I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast, Sammamish, Washington. First of all, a great thank you for all the council members that have been doing things, and a big welcome to the newest city council members. You have a lot of things that you'll be responsible for, and I am sure that you are well up to the task of handling them. As you know, for about the last 7 years, I've been speaking quite frequently at city council meetings normally mostly on stormwater, and I didn't want to disappoint for tonight. Anyway, for consent agenda number 6, you should pass that. I think you're required to pass it. Your HBL is the contractor, and it's about $60,000 to $70,000 so that they can move the city from the 2016 to the 2021 King County Surface Water Design Manual. I do note that the new 2021 one is only, I think, 17 pages longer, but I don't know what the other changes are, and I'm trying to find out on that. But you need to do it as part of National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System requirements for the municipal for Phase 2 stormwater permit for the city. So I just wanted to point that out and say I'm glad to see that's coming forth, and hopefully we'll be interacting on that. And then the second thing I wanted to comment on is the item 12. It's a presentation on the Laughing Jacobs Basin Plan. Basin plans are also required that you do. The Zach Coops Basin Plan was adopted in 2018. Laughing Jacobs is the next. And I have participated in a few things and heard the presentations. I guess what I'd like to have focused on is anytime you do a basin plan, it's super important to know if and where and how big and how often are the drainage complaints that happen in the area. If you've got saturated soils or water under roads, it really impacts people that even live just a little bit downhill. It can wipe out trees and other things, and you need to deal with the drainage issues before they happen and not wait years and years to do something. So I hope that drainage complaints, flooding, and even changes from like how it used to be to now, because with the development that we've had, obviously we don't have the same stormwater, and some of it's man-managed and some of it's earth-managed by Mother Nature, and I think that's really important. The second thing is when I had read the report in full in prior meetings, it looks like they're taking some number like 40, knocking it down to 20, and they gave you a couple examples. Those are examples and not particularly the ones intended to do. And I think it's very important to understand that there probably are 1, 3, 5, 10 kind of top picks that would need to get done, and those should be prioritized. And then while we've got wet weather and it's raining, city staff probably can't do it. Maybe maintenance people can do it, or you could even work
15
with
seconds.
people who live right next to it, and then they could monitor and maybe take pictures and reports so that when we get into the budget allocations for next year in the stormwater CIP, you'll know, hey, these really were the biggest and this what changed. So those are my ideas. Thank you for listening, and I certainly appreciate all you do. Happy New Year.
Mary, I have a quick question, and it has to do with stormwater stewards. By any chance, do you think that that would be an avenue to have the stormwater stewards who have adopted the different areas, for example, could they help monitor and provide kind of real-time updates and reports, or is that not realistic?
Well, I'm a stormwater steward, conned into people long ago. If you don't live near the place, it's hard. Like you'd have to get out when it's snowing or when there's a big rainstorm. And I can tell you just for the area I live in, to go from the top of the hill to the bottom and do the photo documentations I provided, that takes me 3 hours sometimes. So you're hammering on your volunteers already. And if somebody just lives next door, I mean, they don't have to be super technical to go, oh, there's more water. Let me take a photo. Let me upload it to the city website. It's just, we're looking to give a record that's meaningful, particularly on big rain event days. And you do have rain gauges now in the city. The Water District has some, and King County also has several.
Thank you.
I will now unmute the next caller. Paul Stickney.
Happy New Year, City Council members. Paul Stickney, Sammamish here. Congratulations to new council members, new mayor, and new deputy mayor. Hope this is a great year for everyone involved. To that end, sent in an email today. Want to reach out to each of you to talk about working on a issue that has been unintentional to a large degree, but our community has had housing supplies that have been misdeveloped over time. King County was in charge of housing here in Sammamish before incorporation. Roughly 85% of our housing stock, they allowed either before incorporation or in the pipeline. Our community has built about 15% of the housing. Never have analyzed what needs are for our own internally over time. So if we as a community face alleviating housing misdevelopment, I believe it will add notable, holistic, sustainable enrichments well above and beyond those we presently have and enjoy in our community today. And the enrichments will create far greater values for our residents and city than for development interests. This is actually a non-zero sum game where everybody comes out ahead. It's a win-win-win. There have been 3 different approaches to growth. Everybody is real passionate that the position that they've supported in the past has been the correct one, but there are some net positive asks to help figure out what really is the best path for our community. The first is to obtain lacking information that's never informed decisions on housing land use in our community. The next is to reduce traffic congestion. Everybody agrees with this. The third is to alleviate housing misdevelopment. A lot of people don't want to talk about this, but I think it's very important to look at this internally, not externally. What does our community need and want over a cycle of life? It's not about changing the economic and demographic of who lives here. It's about allowing them to stay in the community over time as needs change. Doing those things will enable holistic enrichments across the board. Take a look at the one-page sheet I turned in with the 40 consequence topics. And let's create 2 inspiring visions, one for 95% of the city,
15
and
seconds.
one for 3 and 2% of the city. I'm going to reach out to chat with all of you. I have a couple things to share that you haven't seen before that I think are short, concise, clear, and very powerful to help to bridge the divide on different opinions in housing, because there are groups, we, ourselves, and us, we have different opinions. Let's bring some information together, level set with that information.
Sorry, we have one further caller.
Deputy Mayor, we just have one caller left. If we could just get them out of the way, if you're amenable to that.
I think that's okay.
Perfect.
Thanks, Mike.
Pam Stewart.
Good evening. Welcome to the new council members. Pam Stewart, Sammamish resident. It's odd to be on the other side, but I want to welcome the new council members. And I want to ask you a very difficult question here. First, I'd like to point out that in regards to the investigation of the city manager, facts are not protected by attorney-client privilege. While communications are protected, the underlying facts are discoverable. And while you may make legal arguments to protect the city, your first obligation is to the people. Please remember, we are a government for the people, of the people, by the people, and for the people. So while you have an obligation to protect the city, your first obligation, and you cannot do so, and protect the city at the expense of the people. If you need to hide facts to protect the city, that is the quintessential government cover-up. Please do not be party to a cover-up. Serve the people. Release the facts and findings from the investigation. Secondly, I hope that you will continue to pursue the information regarding legal contracts. Before I left the council, I asked a lot of questions about our contracts. There seemed to be a number of contracts that were signed for $49,999, just $1 below the limit that would require the city manager to come to council for approval. And these contracts, while they are within the signing limit of the city manager, should still be coming forward so that the public knows what's going on. So please continue to pursue that and get to the bottom of all of that information. I have to ponder in these recent days how much snow removal we could be purchasing for what we've been spending on some of these legal contracts. And there are a lot of people whose side roads have not been cleared, who are still struggling. I can tell you there are a number of students who fell today at school because the parking lots were not cleared. So there's a lot of work that can be done in the city. There's a lot that we can do to serve the public in ways, I believe, that are better than spending hundreds of thousands and now millions of dollars on legal contracts. And finally, the farmers market. It is likely the single most attended and most loved event that our city hosts. The Chamber of Commerce has been doing this since the beginning. They've done a great job. People love it. There's no reason for us at this point in time to upset that apple cart. Certainly, if down the road you want to enhance those partnerships, that sounds great. But right now, given everything that the council is juggling, please continue the farmers market. Please give our community a gathering place that they can safely gather outside during these very trying times with COVID. So I appreciate your service. Happy New Year.
15 seconds.
And best of luck.
Thank you to all of
Did we lose Christy?
I think Christy got demoted and I stayed.
Callie, you want to just move us on and have Mike Suggs start the next item on the agenda, please?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, Mike, are you ready to take it away?
Yes, I am. Thank you. We're just having a few technical difficulties over here, but we'll push ahead. We're going to, maybe we should wait until we get our legislators switched over to panelists. So if you could just give us a couple minutes here, we're going to get everyone switched over.
Okay, I'm back. I somehow got demoted to a participant and I couldn't, all I could do was raise my hand. Sorry. So I could hear Mike saying they're having some technical difficulties. Okay.
Yes, Mayor, we're just taking a minute or two to switch over all of our legislators and lobbyists.
Perfect. I see Senator Dingra. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us this evening. I think they're trying to bring everyone else online here. Luke, welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Mayor. Always a pleasure.
Senator Mullet, nice to see you.
Oh, good evening. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I see Nick just popped on.
I had to leave Sammamish to come back to Issaquah to do my meeting with Sammamish.
Representative Ramos.
Discussion at the restaurant. How long do you say Happy New Year when people come in to get a pizza? And there's one argument, you can say Happy New Year up in the whole first week, and then we have half our staff that thinks it's over. You can't say Happy New Year as of January 4th, so no resolution.
Is that a war on New Year?
I don't know. Has New Year been canceled?
No, it hasn't. Well, we have some great, it's wonderful to see so many of you here. They keep popping on. I see Senator Wellman is on and Representative Tai.
We just need to get like 3 more ledge districts for Sammamish.
No, I think we're good at 3. We can only fit so many squares on the Zoom screen. So, Mike, I will ask you, do we have everyone here?
I learned, Larry Singer, that you and the mayor of Duval are plane buddies over there in the middle of Washington. I didn't realize that till today.
Yeah, we have cabins about 7 miles apart.
And she said you're responsible for her cabin in plane.
That is somewhat true.
Mr. City Manager, is Mike Sugg, I don't know if he's present at City Hall, but do we have everyone on? Can we start rolling?
Mike is present at City Hall, and he believes.
I think we have everybody with us, so we can just jump right in.
I want to be cognizant of your time here. Thank you to all of you. We've got everyone from at least somebody from the 45th, 41st, and the 5th. So I think we've got all of our reps in the 45th. Thank you. I'm scanning my screen here. I think we've got everybody in the 5th. And
where's Tana? We gotta send out a search party.
Well, at any rate, thank you all for joining us this evening. We wanted to go through our legislative priorities for 2022. We have Luke Esser and Nick Federici. Our lobbyists are on with us. I know you all know them well, which is good. And so I want to open this up to council for questions and also to you all to ask questions of us. Hopefully you were able to get the our legislative priorities in advance, so you know what Sammamish is looking for through the legislative session. And we are very good, Mike Sugg is very good at creating a very creative, the SAM for Sammamish, to kind of designate what our legislative priorities are. So State Route 202 congestion relief is the S, A is accessible regional connections, and M is the metro monopoly. So Mike, I don't know if you want us to just dive in and talk about these or if you want to lead this discussion, but we should probably start with SR 202.
Yes, I do have some maps prepared as well, if it'd be helpful to pull those up just for context on what we're talking about. So we can just, I guess, start with the S, as you mentioned, Mayor.
And Mike, would you like me to take it from here? I'm happy to do so.
Yes, please. I'm fumbling around with technology over here. I appreciate it.
You're doing great, and I appreciate it. And I think every conversation should start with thanks for what the local delegation has done in recent years, and some great progress has been made in trying to bring the kokanee salmon back through funding for fish culverts on a couple of our local creeks, George Davis and Ebright, and some significant funding for the Lewis Thompson Road Tightline project in the last session of the legislature. And it's much needed because that little red fish is under a lot of stress. So I want to thank you for that, all of the great things the local delegation has done in past years. And their work remains to be done. So that's what we're largely here for today. So I do want to start talking about that S on the SAM, and the S is for State Route 202. Congestion relief. And the most important project there is a needed roundabout at SR 202 and Sahali Way. And in 2017, the state legislature funded a study by WashDOT of the 202 corridor from East Lake Sammamish Road to 244th, and identified some priority projects. And the top scoring project on the midterm strategies list was this SR 202 Sahali intersection roundabout that will help to address the significant congestion that occurs at that intersection. Again, this is an area where thanks can be offered because in the last session of the legislature that we ended up with a new revenue transportation package not being adopted in both Chair Fai's Miles Ahead Washington plan and in Senator Hobbs's Forward Washington plan. $12.4 million was provided for the SR 202 Sahali intersection roundabout. And we know that projects don't end up in those packages by accident or by circumstance. We know our local legislators went to bat, and that $12.4 million we think is is a good number to aim for, because the study, as I mentioned, was completed in 2019, and that was the upper end of the construction estimate. And I doubt that the cost of construction projects is going down in the present atmosphere. So that's still a good number we think to aim for, but that is a priority project on the SR 202 level. And happy to, we can stop here if there's any questions on that particular project. We do, I believe, have our Public Works Director to answer questions about that and any other of our Transpo projects. But if not, we can move on to the A of the SAM legislative agenda.
Oh, I had a question.
Please.
Councilmember Lamb, go ahead.
So I see that 202 in Sahali Way. Where is East Lake Sammamish in 202? Was that somewhere on the top of the list that you're referring to?
It's a great question, Council Member. Last year's agenda had funding for that project. The good news is that project is actually located just across the boundary into the city of Redmond, and the city of Redmond took leadership in funding and taking care of that project. So it's my understanding, and I'll defer to you, Mike, or the Public Works Director, that I believe the intersection of East Lake Sammamish Parkway and SR 202 is being taken care of as we speak.
That is correct.
Councilmember Moran.
Yeah, that intersection is by where our business was, and that intersection has got a design, as I tried to state months ago. That intersection has already got a design set for it. It's in the city of Redmond, and that design has been out for that intersection for months. So they've got it designed. They've got it set to where that train's coming in. They're already setting and cleared the way for where the rail's coming in and how that intersection is going to be laid out.
Thank you. Luke, I'll turn it back over to you.
And if there's no other questions, I will hand the baton off to my colleague Nick Federici for the A section of the agenda.
Thank you, Luke, and good to see everyone tonight. Legislators, we'll be seeing far too much of each other all too soon. Good to see ongoing members of the council and staff, and welcome to new members of the council. Looking forward to working with you as well. Nick Federici here, as part of the team that represents you down in Olympia. Under the accessible regional connections piece, first want to underscore that the city is supportive of a new revenue package for transportation. We understand that you can't make something from nothing, and that we need to look at new revenue sources for and increased revenue sources in order to fund the additional projects that we have on this list. So we're willing to step up to the plate as advocates for that, in addition to requesting the funding for these additional projects. The first of which is Issaquah Pine Lake Road improvements, which would improve peak hour traffic around the existing Sunny Hills Elementary and Fire Station by redesigning a roundabout at the intersection of Issaquah Pine Lake Road and Southeast 32nd Street. That particular project lies at the border of the intersection of also the 5th legislative district and the 41st legislative district, at least the current current districts. So there's opportunities for partnership there between multiple delegations on that particular project. The second item is improving traffic operations by redesigning the intersection at 228th Avenue Southeast and Southeast 40th Street. Again, at a new school that's being built by Issaquah School District near Providence Point. So both of these top two projects under the A priority deal with safety and traffic around the first and existing, now a new school. This one is in the 41st district. The third project, Sahali Way, northeast improvement to improve traffic operations by putting a signal at the historically problematic intersection. I believe that's the nice language that Mr. Sugg has put there at Sahali Way and Northeast 28th Place, and also provides a transit stop opportunity at a new signal there, and as well as improving a concurrency failure that currently bedevils the city. So that particular intersection is within the 45th legislative district. So between the, and we didn't do that on purpose, but between these three these three transportation priorities, there's representation for all three areas of the city that are in the three respective legislative districts.
Councilmember Howe?
A quick question about the transit stop. Does that mean just the sign, or does it mean a shelter?
I'll hand that question to the folks from Public Works or the city manager's office.
I believe that is a full shelter, Councilmember Howe.
Senator Millett?
Yeah, are there price tags to go along with those? Are you going to send that information to us, or?
Yes, you should have that in your email that outlines this. For the Issaquah Pine Lake Road improvements, the estimated project cost is between $3.5 and $5.5 million. For the improvements at 228th Avenue Southeast and Southeast 40th Street, between $1.5 to $3.7 million. And for the Sahali Way Northeast improvement, the estimated project cost between 1.8 and 2.5 million. So none of them, particularly if there's additional revenue available, none of them are budget busters by the size, and each would make a significant improvement in their areas of the city.
And I will proceed, if there's no further questions, I'll proceed to letter M.
I have a question, if I might.
Oh, please.
Yes.
On the roundabouts and the costs that you show here, I have the handout. Are these all designed and ensure that they're actually fully accessible for school buses and large trucks, and just double checking? I'm sure they are, but I always have to ask after my experience of being on the school board with the Issaquah School District and roundabouts and community. I feel like I have to do my diligence.
I am unable to promote our Public Works Director to a panelist, but I can say we pulled those estimates from the WashDOT's study of the SR202 corridor. So those were the estimates that were provided by WashDOT. I would need to double check on whether they include the components.
We'll get you an answer to that, Representative. It's a fair question, and I'll make certain we get you an answer about that particular question.
And in particular on the in-community roundabouts, I know the 202 one is probably a safer bet, but the ones that are on Issaquah Pine Lake and 228th and Sahali Way.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You bet. You bet.
Of course.
If there's no further questions, I'll move on to the M part of the agenda, which is for Metro monopoly. And this is an issue that relates to private employer shuttles utilizing the park and ride lots that are located within the city, in particular the South Sammamish Park and Ride lot. And under current state law, a transit agency that has received state funding for a park and ride lot must make reasonable accommodations for the use of that lot to private employer shuttles until the point where that park and ride lot is 90% full. And under current law, at that point, the agency is not required to make any accommodation whatsoever. And we don't think we think it's reasonable to require the agency to make reasonable accommodation, to at least negotiate in good faith. And we understand that there needs to be continuing requirements for insurance and for compensation of any costs that are incurred. But we've spoken with local employers like T-Mobile that would very much like to see this law change, so that at least there needs to be the conversation, a willingness to negotiate in good faith. We think the South Sammamish Park and Ride lot is a greatly underutilized resource that could do a lot more good for the community if there wasn't this monopoly. This also opens up another issue that the north side of the city was supposed to, under the 2016 Sound Transit 3, excuse me, that was Sound Transit 2, I believe, have a new 200 stall park and ride lot that has yet to really move forward in any shape or fashion. And this is all kind of emblematic of the lack of transit service, the lack of transit facilities on the Sammamish Plateau. So it kind of it exacerbates the situation that we have this metro monopoly. So it's all part and parcel of that lack of public transit. So we wanted to continue to underline that as a concern to the local delegation. And Nick, I'll let you take on what we call the back page of the agenda for those who have the hard copy.
Just one major item here, the Public Works Assistance account has been notoriously given short shrift over time. Senator Wellman, you'll note that we are no longer calling it the Public Works Trust Fund, but by its accurate name, the Public Works Assistance account, which I know had caused you some consternation in the past. We do listen and respond. Hold on, my 5-year-old is delivering me dinner. Thank you, sweetie. Sorry about that. Love you too, sweetie. Sorry. Sorry about that. Timing is everything. So just want to ensure that there's full funding for the Public Works Assistance account. I know that's something you hear from a lot of folks, including probably all your municipalities, that it provides such a major positive impact for infrastructure projects across the state, and Sammamish has used it in the past to great reward. We also support the agendas of our partner organizations, including Association of Washington Cities, Eastside Human Services Forum, the Eastside Transportation Partnership, King County Cities Climate Collaboration, the Lake Washington Cedar Sammamish Watershed Partners, and the Sound Cities Association, all of whom we work closely with for both their priorities as well as their support of ours. So thank you. Questions about any of those? And just to add to, I just want to add to Luke's thanks. It's a pleasure to work with these 3 delegations and really appreciate your partnership with the city and with one another to be able to help the projects that we've been able to acquire for funding for the projects that we've been able to acquire for the city of Sammamish in the last several years, and look forward to working again this year and into the future productively. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Senator Wellman.
Yes, I guess the talk about the Public Works Assistance account made me think about the PFAS water situation. And we had talked about it. We were planning on doing something about it. There was major disconnect with your water department in terms of the information that we got. We pulled back from that. Where are we? Where are you? What do you need? Is it done? Do we have mitigation going on? What's happening? Can we get an update?
Mike, do you want to address that, or?
I don't have the information for that item. Mayor, did you have something?
I was just going to ask if Councilmember Moran might have some information, since I know this was a topic at Eastside Fire and Rescue, and she's a board member there.
My recollection of this particular issue was that it was not the city's water department, I think, that was involved in the conversation with the water district, which is separate from municipal government. And so I don't know if there's been coordination there happening with the city as well as the district. But I believe that the water district is the folks with the primary responsibility around those issues.
Yeah,
that's
correct. It's the water district.
I would just suggest that the city cares a lot about whether or not they've got PFAS in their water, and that's going out to their citizens. So in terms of whose responsibility it is, I think you're absolutely correct, Nick. But I do think that, we would all like to have some information about where it stands.
Well, I can tell you that it's been found in one of the upper wells. So before it was in the valley, and solely in the valley, and now it's been found up in the Highland well. And so I can tell you that was just information that I did not learn from EF&R. It was information that I learned on the side. And so I do know that conversations are being brought together because that was something that I was coordinating, again, on the side, and trying to bring people from my background from the water district, trying to bring everybody kind of together to work on that issue combined. So it would be the Water District working with EF&R, because we're all working toward the same goal, and that is to serve all the residents and to fix the problem. Since there is not a PFAS, there's nothing in the state that gives us a guideline for what PFAS is. We need to work together to figure out, there should be nothing in that water as far as everybody's concerned. So the idea is, how do we clean it? How do we fix it? How do we limit it? Right now, they know that if they close a well, they can limit to where it's moving to and where it's migrating to, and they can hold it from, moving to certain areas to a different well or toward the lake. And so there's a lot of things, but they need to work together and how that's happening, and not stop worrying about who's blaming who. So I think that a lot of that needs to take place.
Councilmember Howe, I see you have your hand up. If I can, really quick, just because I saw a message from Representative Springer that he's got to drop off, I just wanted to give him one opportunity real quick if he has any questions of us before he has to go.
Thanks, Christy. I appreciate that. I don't have any questions. I think I'll follow up with the email and look more closely there. So, and we'll be in touch a lot in the next few weeks. So, thanks a lot for having us.
Thank you so much for attending this evening. We really appreciate it. Councilmember Howe.
My question just had to do with Senator Bowman's comment about the water. Is there any tie-in to what Representative Kim Schreier is trying to do with creating a solution basically for PFAS? Because she was working on infrastructure budget money specifically for that in Sammamish.
Yep, and everybody's fighting for it, so that's part of it as well.
Well, I'm trying to figure, is it because there's multiple people going after it?
Yep.
Thank you.
So do any of our representatives or senators have any questions of us? Before we let you go, we want to be cognizant of your time here this evening. We really appreciate you all attending and hearing us out on our priorities for 2022. Representative Tai.
Thank you. I think I sort of typed my question in the chat. I just wanted to make sure that I am not missing anything, because right now it seems that your top priorities, and my apology for having to put it in certain buckets, because that's sort of how we work and functioning in buckets and committees we reside in, is mainly on transportation and as far as healthcare, education, and human services. You guys are good to go, and you support all the other priorities from your partners when it's come to those topics. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's a fair assessment.
Thank you.
Representative Ramos.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for this. It's great, succinct, to the point on all these issues. So thank you very much. And on transportation, obviously, I'm working on a whole lot of things, so that has a lot of ties together. The one thing I just threw out, just had a question on, as you think about which one was it here, the intersection improvement next to where the new school is being built. Just a question on whether if that's an impact from the school, and the cause from school traffic and so forth, if there is impact mitigation or something from that project being built that's there as well that you could maybe take some advantage of or not. So just a question on that. And thanks for all this work.
Yeah, so I can answer the question. So actually that intersection there is already failing without the school's impact. And there's two of them that are slated there. There's a comprehensive high school and an elementary school. So certainly it will exacerbate an existing problem and potentially make some other problems in the city of Sammamish. I think our hope is to remedy that intersection as to mitigate some of the traffic that might head through neighborhoods, which do not have, their street standards are quite substandard. There's no curb, gutter, or sidewalk in the neighborhood. So we don't want kids walking to school and traffic increasing in a neighborhood. Senator Mullet.
Thank you.
On the Metro piece, do we know what it would cost to buy additional service from Metro, or is that an unknown?
Staff might be able to comment. Council actually gave them direction to go have that conversation with Metro directly to find out the costs for buying service off the top. So I don't know if we have any answers. It sounds like we had trouble getting our Public Works Director promoted. Mr. City Manager, can you speak to that?
We don't have that information yet. You've asked us to pursue it, and so we are still in the process of doing that.
Senator Wellman.
So I will never miss an opportunity to check in on your broadband. And so just asking, do you feel that you have adequate service? Are you feeling that you are, in a position to attract business because you've got excellent broadband throughout Sammamish? Or do you have pockets that we should be aware of?
Councilmember Lamb.
So broadband was on my platform when I ran for city council. 98% of the people in Sammamish do have internet. We only have about 38 or 39% that have access to broadband. I think broadband would be a huge win for our city. It would definitely attract more business to our city. And we are in need of increasing our revenues. And I do think broadband would be, like I said, a huge win for us just because it would attract more business.
So I think I'm confused about where you're going with the definitions of what is, if you've got connectivity to the internet, I'm not sure what you're using. Are you using Wi-Fi to connect your phones? Is that what you're doing?
We're using cable. It's mostly cable. It is not fiber optics. We have a huge number of residents that work from home, and there's a big difference between upload and download speeds if you have cable versus fiber optics.
Okay, at some point, if we can, perhaps the city council could run a survey to ask people to do a speed count, and we could get some information, which would not be very difficult. Anybody can do that just by, going into Google and doing speed tests. It would be great to get a survey of the speeds around the plateau, well, throughout Sammamish. It will help us help you also.
That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions, either from our representative senators or council members, before we let you all go?
I'll just say on the last item, when you're talking about the public assistance account, we were able to, working with Senator Mullet on the bicameral capital budget, make sure that the public assistance account this last budget cycle was actually fully funded. And I know both of us are, as well as many of our colleagues here on the call, are looking forward to making sure that is maintained. So we'll just put that plug in for you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, well, thank you to each and every one of you for carving out some time for us this evening. We really do appreciate you all and the work that you've done for us and will do in the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, good night all. Except for council members, you have to stay. Okay, so for council, our next item is consent calendar. I would entertain a motion.
I'll motion to accept.
And I'll second.
Great, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it by a vote of 7-0. The consent calendar is passed. Okay, our next item is a presentation. This is a discussion on the Eastside Fire and Rescue Wildfire Prevention Program. Mr. City Manager.
We have Fire Chief Clark, who will join us and lead in that discussion this evening. Chief. stand by, council, as we promote the chief to a participant.
Good evening, everybody.
We can.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, appreciate your time tonight. I just have a brief overview of a discussion for you, and then my intention here is to be here to answer your questions and belay any concerns you may have. So as a quick review, we started this process probably about 6 months ago. As far as staff goes, we actually started this, I guess, over a year ago when it comes to wildfire mitigation. And just to frame what we're referring to, as a reminder, the west side of the mountains here are starting to dry out. And over the last several years, we have seen more and more fires begin, brush fires and what we would call small forest fires have begun. And we've had them in our service area. Specifically last summer, we had one that lasted a week. And we do not anticipate the drying out to stop. We're heading down that path. And we have set out to do everything we can to prevent wildfires. As you know, we have a 190-mile service area that does not include Woodinville. We're only talking for this proposal, we're only talking for our proper partners, the 5 full-fledged partners, which is Sammamish, Issaquah, North Bend, Fire District 10, and Fire District 38. That's 190 square miles. When it comes to wildfire prevention and wildfire preparedness, wildfire is not going to recognize a city border. It's not going to recognize a jurisdictional border. It's going to go where it wants based on the land, the topography, the weather. And in order to do this properly, we need to fully prepare as big an area as possible, and obviously even bigger than our service area. But as far as what we have control over, we have control over our service area. So we put together a plan that looks at what can we do. And one of the biggest things we need is we need resources in order to go out into the community and educate the community. And now educating the community comes on many levels. The FireWise program, which many of you have seen community presentations that me or my staff have done throughout our service area. FireWise has to do with first preparing your home, then expanding to preparing your entire property, your community, your neighborhood, and ultimately the entire city. But in order to do that, we need to hit every HOA, community group, any kind of organized meeting, church groups that will listen, and then have the resources and the ability to coordinate not only the education piece, but then take it to the step further, those that we can motivate. Let's talk about an HOA for an example. If you have a motivated HOA, they are interested in doing some wildfire mitigation, we're going to need to consult with them, write them a plan, help them through the process of what it means to prepare themselves. Now, after preparing themselves, and even simultaneously, I guess, we have work to do at the city code level, whether it's the fire code or the building code about building materials that are being used on new buildings. And that some of that is county code, some of that is state code. We have layers of fire prevention code that we need to work on that we can learn from California, Arizona, Oregon, some of the states that have burned an awful lot, unfortunately. We can learn ahead of time before the crisis necessarily hits our side, but we need to have boots on the ground in order to facilitate that kind of preparedness. So we're talking at least those 2 levels of preparedness. So we put together this plan to add a wildfire mitigation specialist, which is an emergency management professional that would specialize in wildfire mitigation, but their core fundamental background would be in emergency management. That's where this program belongs, in emergency management. They would be supported by an administrative support person, most likely an analyst of some sort, that is equipped and able to not only do all the scheduling and the community outreach, but the writing of the plans, the submitting of the plans, pursuing grants, managing grants, coordinating with all levels of government, from the local government, county, state, even federal when it comes to a lot of the grant guidance, and then coordinating, of course, with our emergency manager. What makes this unique for Sammamish, of course, is that the emergency manager that Eastside currently employs solely serves Sammamish. Contractually, you pay for his salary. That's Andrew Stevens. You pay for his salary. And when we first made that arrangement, it's actually, I spoke with a couple of city managers about this when we were developing it. And then we went through a few city managers. Dave Rudat came on board is when we finalized that plan to move Andrew over. And then with 3 city managers in the past, we spoke about the concept of regionalizing emergency management, looking long-term. That is still a hope of mine, is to see emergency management regionalized. While there are specific individual needs that need to occur within each jurisdiction, emergency management, like wildfire prevention, cannot be successful if it's not regional. We have a regional model here, of course, that Sammamish has been a member of for over 20 years. And we've proven that regionalization works, and it will work on this step. So when we've been to the FAC for several meetings on this subject, we've gone through it. And for you new members, how our process works is when we have some sort of finance related item, the EFR board generally refers it to our FAC, which is our Finance and Administration Committee. That FAC is populated with one voting member from each of the 5 partners, and then any staff associated with the cities that wish to attend. And in Sammamish's case, your finance staff attends most every FAC. And for this subject, they've been at every FAC meeting. Then the FAC makes referrals to the EFR board. And at this point, the FAC has referred, as your packet delineated, option 2 to the EFR board. I committed to the Sammamish City Council a couple of months ago in a meeting that was held that I would bring this discussion to you before we went to the EFR board, which is what we're here to do tonight. Now, the options are really only nuanced for the city of Sammamish. The options don't really matter from a financial perspective too greatly for our other partners. But because you have the independent contract, one of the options that we had on the table, which is not the one we selected as far as the FAC or what staff recommended, was to maintain the city of Sammamish contract independently and then take care of the wildfire mitigation separately. And I still don't advocate for that because that will not establish regionalization. That just silos the efforts and it doesn't streamline our ability to work together. The reason that we suggested option 2, and that's the one being recommended to move forward, is that in fact brings everyone together, which was the original vision of the regionalizing emergency management. We will just focus it initially on wildfire mitigation. But as in City of Sammamish's case, we will continue to provide all of the emergency management services that are in your current contract. We understand we would be the sole provider of emergency management services to you. And we would increase that bench by adding 2 other professionals to that staff that can surge capacity for any of our partners when disaster hits. And, you know, one of the questions I'm frequently asked is, well, what if disaster hits everywhere? Well, that's a very valid question. And we all have a problem if disaster hits everywhere and we'll coordinate it. But that hasn't happened yet. What does happen, and the plateau is very experienced with this, you get wind when others don't. You get roads shut down when others don't. You have more disasters, so to speak, than any of our other partners do on a regular basis where emergency management is engaged. What this proposal does for you is increase that bench for the number of disasters that you currently have. And I can speak that just over the last 6 years of experience. North Bend has had a couple of basically all hands events. So has Issaquah. Sammamish has events annually. It is reliable, we can predict it, and it just comes to fruition. So this is something that benefits you. And then from the actual dollars and cents side, right now you pay, and I'm using round numbers, you pay about $185,000 a year for Andrew under this contract. Under the plan as proposed, that would go down to $147,000. Of the partners, you're the only one that's actually reducing what you're currently paying. Everyone else, this is an add across the board for them. If we were to somehow back out of that, and of course, because we have a contract with you on the contract side, if you chose to keep those silos and kept it not regional from the emergency manager standpoint, then there would be not only the cost of the $185,000 to pay for the emergency manager, but then there would be buying into the wildfire mitigation, which is about $86,000 as proposed. Now, what we are proposing is that for this year, the reason that I brought it up this year is we have end fund balance that the EFR board is well aware of when we went through our mid-buy. And we would like to get started for the wildfire prevention. We'd like to do the hiring of the 2 professionals, get them on board before the summer, get them engaged here while we go through a summer, start getting them introduced to neighborhoods rather than wait another year. We will fund those 2 with end fund balance, and then starting on January 1st, 2023, as part of our budget development process that EFR, as you will as a city, EFR will go through our budget process. We will incorporate this program into the ongoing budget starting on January 1st of 2023. We can certainly wait until January 1st of 2023. Again, that's not my recommendation. It's not my recommendation to the EFR board because time is of the essence. We've lost a couple of years because of COVID. We actually had to cancel a number of Firewise presentations in 2020 when we were just ramping up to really get going on this, working in conjunction with the county. COVID hit and we had to close down all public meetings and we couldn't do the meetings we had scheduled in person. And I really don't think we should wait another summer, which is why we're pushing for this potential right now because we have the resources to do it and we have the ability and we've got a plan that's framed out for that. So with that, I can go on for much longer, as many of you know. I will leave that to questions for you and I'll be happy to take this conversation wherever you're interested in taking it.
Great. I'll open it up to council. We've already got some hands up. Councilmember Howe.
Thank you, first of all, for answering my questions earlier that I wrote to you, Chief, because that was so helpful to get that in advance. My last question, I won't ask any more, is I think this is a fairly new position just in the US. Correct me if that's not accurate. And I'm wondering if you have any statistics that would help us understand for municipalities that actually have this role versus those that don't. Do you have any numbers that support that that this role actually mitigates the wildfires you're talking about?
It's a great question, and that's a tough question. My short answer is no. I don't have any statistics. What I will have is anecdotal, and we can certainly do some research around that. But what I have is anecdotal around the Firewise program itself. It is demonstrated over and over again, mostly in California, that those that have taken the Firewise precautions, you will see overhead pictures of devastation, and you'll see a single house standing for some reason. And oftentimes the reason is mitigation was taking place and a Firewise program was implemented there. Sometimes it's just, the grace of God, I guess, that spared that home. But that's the anecdotal information you'll get. I know Andrew's on the line. If we bring him in, he's the emergency management professional. He can answer some of these things in more detail if we need to go there. But largely, while this is a new position, and Councilmember Howe, you were not on the council when I last briefed on this. When this was first brought up to me a couple of months ago, and I committed to bringing this conversation back, one of the things that I mentioned is the comparisons that are going on right now about the state of Washington and the King County area specifically in comparison to California. What we are seeing right now is the fire activity that California saw 20 years ago. We are heading down a path that California has already been through, and we're learning from them. What they do is they concentrate and they focus on mitigation wherever they can. Now they're way behind the 8 ball. We hope to get ahead. Another piece of this I haven't mentioned, which we would be coordinating with, we can't really manage it, is forest management. And there's lots of layers to that. We love our trees, rightfully so. We love our forests. I have been through some of this in my career in Arizona, but there is mitigation and thinning that needs to occur if we continue to dry out at the rate that we are. And California is experiencing that as well. So what we're trying to do is learn from what California's been through and get ahead of that and hire, for instance, this position, perhaps 15 years before California was hiring this type of a position in order to get something moving.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Deputy Mayor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I have a few questions. I worked at DNR for 8 years, was a firefighter there. So this definitely looks like more of a CAL FIRE model to me, kind of incorporating the structure and wildland side of things. And I was just kind of wondering what our level or your level of engagement is with right now with like King Conservation District, DNR, Forest Service, the tribes, for any partnering for work and outreach and education. If you could answer, I have a few questions, sorry. So that'd be my first one, if you want to go for that.
No problem. Thank you, Councilmember Clark. I love your name. We are, so Eastside Fire and Rescue, as far as King County goes, we have the most advanced wildland firefighting capabilities of anybody in the county. We have been working on wildland response, as I'm sure you know, if you spent 8 years with DNR for decades. We are well integrated with both DNR, the tribes, and King County Conservation District. The the meetings that I was explaining in 2020 were actually co-meetings with the King County Conservation District that we've had to cancel. I'm sorry. So we would continue to be involved with that. I am somewhat familiar with CAL FIRE, where I understand your assessment there. We are not interested in structure, fire protection, or response versus wildland response. We do both, but we're really just looking on this particular program is simply the prevention side. We want to stop the burns from happening, and getting there. So, and coordinating with this, as you know, is not done in a vacuum. We need to coordinate with all those agencies and more. And we will continue to, we've worked with Kim Schreier's office and working hand in hand with the folks at DNR. We have done a number of public meetings in our buildings to help educate the public and do some media releases on prevention before each fire season to demonstrate and support the DNR requests at the state level, so that we know that without DNR being funded properly, it doesn't matter what the rest of us do, quite honestly. Even the event we had last year that lasted a week in our service area, we turned into a DNR response. We couldn't have done it without their helicopters. They needed to come in and be successful. We've all got to work together in order to make it happen.
Yeah, no, very cool. Because I know, of course, education outreach is great, and then all the work that comes with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, with chainsaws and burning.
Yes.
My last question is this a promotion for Andrew? Because I know he has like a huge, a huge job and task already. So I didn't understand if it was a promotion and these will both fall under him, or kind of like his scope, just being able to make sure he can still do his job and not be spread too thin. Because I know he has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and again, he's on the call and he's listening, so I know that we got plenty more he can do. Trust me. No, we are sensitive to that. We understand our commitments to the city of Sammamish. I will say we have also not mentioned on this form, but I did answer this to the FAC and to Councilmember Howe's question today. The actual ultimate responsibility for this program will be under our Deputy Director of Community Programs, who's Jamie Formisano. She will actually be responsible for all the strategic and all of the implementation of the performance goals and managing this and taking things off of Andrew's plate. The actual supervision and everything, that is going to be, we're going to determine that moving forward. Once we, first of all, let's identify the individuals we're going to bring on, see what their capabilities and experience are, and we'll go from there and make the best choice. We understand the commitments that Andrew has, but I will say, Andrew is a tremendous emergency manager. He understands and values regionalization, and he probably, I know what he does regionally. I don't believe you as a council understand how much regional work he does. And that's not your fault. That's just simply to see what he does day to day. I think you would be shocked at how much he's already doing just to function as an emergency manager. You asked specifically if this is a promotion for him. No, it's not a promotion for him. However, there is as far as his position goes, I also answered a question for Councilmember Howe on salaries. We do comparable salaries, and as far as emergency manager goes, he is paid below the market right now. So this will adjust it again starting January 1st of 2023. We're looking to adjust this and make not only this position but the other two positions at the right level. But that's not necessarily a promotion. It doesn't mean there won't be a promotion, but really this is a framework that we're going to build as we go, and I'm going to leave that to the Deputy Director of Community Programs to really develop the program in the manner that she sees fit moving forward in consultation with Andrew and understanding all the commitments wrapped around that.
I don't see any more hands, but I'll ask a few questions. Chief, I know I asked a handful already over email, and certainly appreciate both you and Andrew kind of chiming in and helping me to wrap my arms around this. I think the regionalization thing, I think, is important for the reasons that you stated, which is, Wildfire doesn't know that it needs to stop at a jurisdictional boundary. I think the fires that we just saw in Colorado spread between Louisville and Superior, Colorado, and wiped out 1,000 homes in a matter of a very short period of time. But that being said, I think my overarching concern and just trying to make sure that Sammamish is covered from an emergency standpoint outside of fire. And that was kind of where my questions were kind of poking at, which is in 2016, the city of Sammamish had a report done about how woefully underprepared we were for an emergency. At that time, we did not have an emergency manager. It's ultimately what led to Andrew's hiring. And one of those recommendations is that we had a full-time emergency manager. And I think my overarching question is, and I know your response back was that our emergency stuff would be enhanced. I guess I just want to understand how it will be enhanced, like holistically. I think I still have some discrepancy or misunderstanding it maybe in what the WAC says, that we have to do that comprehensive emergency management plan every 2 years. But the last time that we did it was in February of 2017. So I guess I'm trying to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row. Should we have something other than a fire, right? We've got a fault line, we could have an earthquake. I guess I need the reassurance that if we are changing the emergency manager's role to cover an additional element, which is, I totally agree, is completely under emergency management. But I want to make sure that Sammamish is whole as far as emergency management goes. And I guess I'm looking for that information.
And it's very fair question that you have. And Andrew has gone through the document that you inquired about from 2016. And that's about when I arrived as well. And knowing where you were coming from, I remember the history there that, emergency management, I'm going to paraphrase, was kind of a train wreck. Sammamish, and it was a huge community issue. In fact, a number of our volunteers on the department are Sammamish residents, and they had huge concerns over emergency management. You are light years ahead of where you were 5 years ago, in large part because of the preparation that Andrew's done. He went through, and I will dress this up a bit in the next day or two and send this out to council. He made comments after each section of his description of what's been done and where we're at with each of those items. And I'll share that. I'll have him put that out to you in the next day or two, so you will all see that. Another thing is that another important part of the recommended step was not only that it was a full-time emergency manager, but was actually that like-sized departments or cities have 2 to 3. It actually says 2 or more people assigned to a program like this. And when I say a program like this, I'm now referring to emergency management in general. All right. As a former emergency manager for a large city, you can never have there is always work to do in emergency management. It is about striking the balance of ensuring that you are meeting the baseline of what you need to stay capable. And the most important thing I believe Sammamish can do is maintain that baseline. And I have no problems certifying that you will not only maintain what you have, it will grow. For instance, with the addition of the administrative analyst, let's say, in part of this, time that Andrew now spends writing, which it's hard to articulate how much time he spends writing right now for applications, for writing plans, stuff that he as the emergency manager just simply shouldn't do. He can use his talents elsewhere and direct someone else to take care of those. We can get all that done now without affecting any of Andrew's time and freeing up all of his time, not only for you, but for our other partners in the other communities that I described earlier. The primary focus will simply be wildfire mitigation. But in the meantime, the CEMP, for instance, which you brought up, or your EOC exercises, your emergency operations planning, and writing and exercising those. The emergency manager now, along with the wildfire mitigation specialist, who is also an emergency management professional, can be out in Sammamish actually taking care of and deploying the true work of emergency management, as opposed to doing all of the writing and taking care of those things. So that's when I say your capacity is going to increase. That's one way. The next way is, let's say the earthquake hits, anecdotally. Arguably, if the earthquake hits, that's the one scenario that's going to affect all 5 partners probably pretty uniformly, right? We're going to have a crisis. Right now, across those 5 partners, we have Andrew as an emergency manager, and we have an emergency manager in Issaquah. That's our emergency management capability across those 5 partners. If we have this deployed, we instantly double that capability to 4 emergency management professionals. This admin professional is going to be proficient and certified in emergency management the longer that individual works within emergency management. So we're going to have 4 in the region. So that's for the large one. But then what we do see in our day-to-day experiences, as I described earlier, are the individual community disasters. And now, instead of having 1, when Sammamish hits, you have 3. The COVID site that we just did with the testing site is another great example that Andrew flexed with and was able to deploy the vaccinations for a prolonged amount of time. He did a wonderful job. But now, again, we would have 3 people to be doing that regionally and in direct support of Sammamish. Or if Andrew was tied up with that, now one of those members is up taking care of what Sammamish needs. It is the redundancy for this is just much more efficient than what you have now. And the beauty of it is you're not paying for all of it. You're paying for a piece of it because everybody else is sharing in that. So completely understand your concerns. We're more than willing, I'm more than willing to talk with Dave, who we already have a great working relationship when it comes to this. He's ultimately responsible for Sammamish, and he's not shy. I don't know if you've noticed that with him, but he picks up the phone and says, "Hey, Jeff, where are we at with this? This isn't on time." I trust he's going to keep me honest, and my job is to keep all of our partners served, and I will certainly do that. And I believe that Dave will do a great job as the steward of that to ensure that it happens moving forward.
So just as a follow on there, who would we, I mean, if the job becomes too much and the emergency management responsibilities that are, dedicated exclusively to the city of Sammamish, who's going to raise the white flag and say, hey, we can't do this all? And I'm starting to think, do we need a 0.5 FTE for Sammamish exclusively, like not under EFR? I mean, obviously there would have to be coordination between Andrew and that person, but who would we hear from? Is it going to be from our city manager? Is it going to be from the EFR side that, hey, we can't keep our head above water on this? I'm just trying to make sure that the city of Sammamish is whole.
That's fair. You will hear from both of us. Okay. We meet monthly on it, and we have to talk about it, but you'll hear about it well ahead of time. The EFR board, your 2 reps on the EFR board are going to hear about it because there will be ongoing reports about what we're doing in the emergency management. And one sign will be if you're not getting the emergency management reports when you do have events that you're used to getting, that is going to be an internal sign. And I don't see that slipping. We have to take care of the events. That's why we're here more so than the actual mitigation. Mitigation is what we do whenever we can find time to do mitigation, we do mitigation. But our primary goal and response is taking care of the actual emergency that occurs. And then, if in fact we miss a CEMP deadline, for instance, that's a sign. You have not missed one. The state provided an exemption and a delay because of COVID and a number of other staffing reasons. The city of Sammamish has until the end of 2023 to submit the CEMP update. However, CEMP as an example, every time that you deploy your emergency operations plan, which you do regularly with the windstorms and the snowstorms and the events that we've had on the plateau, is an opportunity to exercise the CEMP and update it, and that occurs every time. That is not something that necessarily comes to the council, nor does it need to, but it is what the city, as one of our core functions as a city, we have to perform, and we do. And that will continue as well. And if it doesn't continue, the city manager would see that. Okay. As would I, but the city manager as your agent would see that.
Sure. And none of my questions are doubting the abilities of our emergency manager. I mean, the reason, again, he was brought in is because that report said we were woefully underprepared. Yes. I just want to be sure that somebody is there to say, hey, the job has become bigger because we're trying this regional approach, which again, I think is the right approach. I totally understand emergencies don't know boundaries. But I did have one additional question because Woodinville is mentioned in here as a potential. At what point in time do we know if Woodinville is going to be a participating partner in this?
Well, what I talked to them about, I talked to their their city manager's office. I told them I want to get the program up and running here for our existing partners and see where we're at. They fully understand, excuse me, the conversation I had with their assistant was they are looking on how they're going to develop their emergency management program, and that will most likely require more staffing, and that they would have to bring in to that need. What that staffing would be, what level, whether that's a half-time or a full-time or however that works, we haven't discussed any details, but I think that's where it is. I believe, in fact, I know Andrew has a meeting with the city manager's office in the next week or two, because they're probably where you were 4 or 5 years ago. And they're looking for direction on, you know, what they need to look at. And Andrew's going to help them with that. And as we continue to build that bridge, but you won't see that happen in the next couple of months. You might see some conversations as we get into building the 23-24 budget. Obviously, Woodinville's on the same 2-year plan. But again, those are just in its infancy as far as discussing those things with them. And there would be more resources or commitments made in order to fulfill the need. And the other thing I want to mention about your emergency manager question is, you know, Andrew's still your emergency manager under this plan. Any one of you, as you do now, can reach out to him and contact him and work through it, as will Jamie, as the Deputy Director of Community Programs, will be available, which is someone you don't interact with a lot now, but you will. But either one of them, or anytime you have these questions that you have now, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, where are we at with this? And we will provide that update for you.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I wasn't sure because the asterisk on the Woodinville thing says our costs will be reduced, but it sounds like not in the super near future, potentially before the program starts, or?
Well, maybe perhaps before January 1st of 23, when it actually would start to hit your books, but it won't occur this year. And when I say reduce your costs, is the two wildfire prevention specialists, which is really what this program was as proposed. If Woodinville decided to get in, they would buy in on those two for sure.
Okay.
Then to fit the regional model, they may also have to bring in a emergency management body to assist. That's where I'm saying, so that would be at their cost because they'd be adding on to it. But the buy-in and the sharing would be around wildfire mitigation, not emergency management in general at this point. Okay.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does council have any other questions? Not seeing any. Chief, thank you. Appreciate your time. I know Andrew's on too. Thank you for his time, even though he didn't have to unmute himself.
All right. You're very welcome. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, council, our next item is a presentation on the Laughing Jacobs Basin Plan update. Mr. City Manager, I'll turn this over to you. Mr. City Manager, is there another staff member that's going to grab this one? Oh, I think we've got you on mute, Dave.
Deputy Mayor, I just need you to speak up a little bit. It's not coming through as.
Oh, so we're doing the Laughing Jacobs Basin Plan update. So I was turning it over to you or whichever staff member you have that's.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got our Public Works Director, Jeff Ellicus, Toby Cohen, and Audrey Starcy. Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. And I will, first of all, just welcome new mayor and council members. We're excited for the new year. I'll turn this over to Audrey Starcy, and she'll do the introductions and the baton holding on this project. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. Welcome to the new year and welcome to the new council members. This evening, we will be presenting an update for the Laughing Jacobs Basin Plan. With us tonight is the city's Senior Stormwater Program Manager, Toby Kanan, and Joel Prock with Geosyntec Consultants. And with that, I will let Toby get started.
Thank you, Audrey. Well, Joel gets a presentation up and running. I will, first of all, welcome our new council members. Resident of Sammamish, it's always good to see fresh faces. Yeah, good to see you. Now, thank you for the opportunity to present this to you today. We've been working on this for actually a couple of years now with a prolonged COVID break last year. So we're nearing the finish line on this. We're excited to get going. As Audrey said, I'm joined by Joel Prock, who's been helping out from Geosyntec, our consultant on this. With that, let's look at our agenda. Okay. Really what we want to start out with is just a broad project context of how the basin planning effort works, and also summarize our prior public engagement, some of the watershed description development that we did. The outcome of that are the projects that are geared towards supporting the watershed, And then we want to finish up with outlining what our next steps are before we consider questions. Next slide. Before we dive too deep, I wanted to point out where the Laughing Jacobs Basin is. Laughing Jacobs Creek is the largest stream in the south end of town. It collects water from all the way up from Beaver Lake, and it discharges down at the boat launch at Lake Sammamish, just near the roundabout there. One thing that's kind of unique about this, it does drain through Sammamish and into the city of Issaquah. And as a result of that, we've been partnering with Issaquah through an interlocal agreement. They're contributing 10% cost share on this, and we're also helping them identify projects and what have you within the basin. Next slide. Project context. Why basin planning? I think this is really, you hear about basin planning, you want to kind of understand what it is, but there's really two primary drivers for this. The first is our stormwater comp plan. And very explicitly, we've called out as one of the goals, use basin planning to allocate our limited resources to address priority problems and opportunities. And ultimately what the goal there is, is identify, categorize, the basins, and then determine where the most effective way to use our funds are to support those basin efforts. And the second big one is through our municipal stormwater permit that's overseen by the Department of Ecology. And that's through the Npdes, or National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. One of the permit conditions there is to implement a stormwater planning program. The language it follows is really, it's basin planning. So those are the two primary motivators for this effort. Next slide, Joel. Another part of the project context is really the synergy that exists between basin planning and a couple other current city efforts. Next slide. The first one we're going to look at is SMAP, which is a Stormwater Management Action Planning. This is a hard and fast Npdes requirement that's coming home to roost 2022, and it'll extend into 2023. There's three kind of interim deadlines associated with that. There's really three elements to this. One is receiving water assessment. The second is basin prioritization, identifying which are the most important and so on. And then ultimately developing an action plan to kind of outline how you're going to tailor resources and efforts toward the basin support. Next slide, Joe. The second element that kind of overlaps here is our retrofit strategy. This is something that council approved and adopted late last year. It was a Sammamish retrofit strategy and guidance manual. We developed this initially as part of the Npdes, requirements. The overlap there was largely with SMAP. Those two kind of work in synergy together. Some of the key parts of the retrofit strategy is it really focuses on existing infrastructure and trying to identify shortcomings and areas where we do need to allocate resources toward existing problem areas. Next slide. Then this final element is what we're tackling right now, which is the basin plan. The city, we have a long-term goal of really developing a plan for each and every unique drainage basin within Sammamish. We had started this really 10, 15 years ago. Some early generation plans were developed. That kind of went fallow for a few years. And just recently, we've started picking that up. To this point, we've completed the Inglewood-Thompson drainage basin plan. It encompasses George Davis Creek. One of the projects that were identified there was the George Davis Creek Fish Passage Project, which is on the books now. Another one that we've completed is the Issaquah Creek project. Similar to that, we had a culvert project associated with that, both in support of Kokanee. So, the current plan is deemed to be the next most important drainage basin within the city. That'll be followed by Pine Lake Creek, which will initiate next year. And then we'll go through a prioritization process as part of the overall overall SMAP to identify, future efforts. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel for the next slide here.
Yeah, thank you, Toby. So what is our purpose for the Laughing Jacobs Basin planning effort? So that purpose is to characterize the current physical, biological, and water quality conditions of this watershed. And from that characterization, we want to identify projects and programs that will benefit the quality and health of the basin overall, and ultimately benefit residents who reside within the basin. So what have we done to get there? So this project started back in 2019. And since then, we've done watershed characterization, a lung monitoring effort, a problems and opportunities identification task, some modeling, prioritization, and we ultimately came up with some projects and we came up with some conceptual designs. And now we have a draft basin plan that we've developed that we'll talk about in a little bit. But throughout this effort, we've also had 3 different touches with the public. So we've had a survey and then 2 public meetings as well. So the survey was conducted online and there was a postcard that went out to residents. We got over 400 responses and that was mid-2019. So that's a really great response rate. And then following that survey, we had an in-person open house in July of 2019. And that open house was really vital for this project because it allowed residents to come in and to see display boards and interact with features so that they could voice their opinions about what they value and what they believe is a high priority for this watershed. And then most recently in October of this year or last year, we had a webinar, which was mostly an update to the residents to let them know where we stand with our project progress. And we reached out via various means, including the city newsletter, city Twitter, Instagram, Nextdoor, city website accounts. So we got a lot of outreach and we really publicized our effort quite a bit. So what did the residents really want during that public engagement session back in 2019? So the residents really wanted a balance between environmental preservation and access to public areas. So they identified wetlands, shorelines, and other water systems as a top priority for protection, restoration, and investment of the public funds. So on the left side of this slide, you can see one of the interactive activities from that session. And this was a task where we asked residents to allocate a possible fund of $100 to different tasks. And as you can see, the top one here is to continue managing existing protected natural areas. And that really speaks to how much the residents really value those natural areas. So what's so important about this watershed? So this watershed has 2 bogs, which are sphagnum bogs. Sphagnum bogs are very rare and unique ecosystems. They take about 10,000 years to develop. So they're quite impressive and they do great things for carbon sequestration, and climate change. So we really want to protect those. And as well as the kokanee salmon, they spawn in the lower reach of the Laughing Jacobs Creek. So it's really important to protect that population as well. Overall, the watershed was found to be in pretty good shape. But like we mentioned, we really want to protect these resources that the city already has, and we don't want them to diminish. So how did we come up with some solutions and issues that we could address? So using the public outreach and a internal brainstorming session with the city, we developed this brain map of issues and opportunities for improvement within the watershed. So you can see how we have some main ideas that really branch out and we really tried to cover all aspects of the watershed and how we could improve, safety and environmental preservation and whatnot throughout. And I'll hand this back over to Toby to talk about the prioritization.
Sure, thanks, Joe. Really, the culmination of the basin planning is, ultimately a series of recommendations and projects that are, in service toward preserving these resources. But obviously, we want to get the most bang for our buck and, be the most efficient and effective we can with the dollars that we spend and commit to these projects. So the way we do that is, kind of pass each project through a filter. And the criteria that we've developed here is actually adopted by council a few years ago in 2018 through a resolution. So we've got a real consistent and well thought out system here to go through the different projects. This is the maximum score identified, the specific criteria and elements, and the considerations are all reflecting a fair amount of effort by city staff as well as council over the years. So I want to be real clear that we're not just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. There's a real fairly clear process that we go through to arrive at the significant projects. So with that, I'll turn it back to Joel to touch on some of those.
Thanks, so the projects that we identified are listed on the slide. There are 6 total. So 2 of these are the sphagnum bogs. They're circled in yellow here. For these 2 areas, we really want to protect those ecosystems. So we want to improve the stormwater runoff using bioretention systems. The next area is the southern end of the basin. So this is the idea of implementing roadway runoff stormwater treatment for East 43rd Way and East Lake Sammamish Parkway. So these 2 areas would benefit. There's currently no real treatment here, and we could implement some minimal infrastructure to really get treatment. And in addition, like Toby mentioned earlier, part of the basin is in Issaquah. So there's a portion down here that's in the city of Issaquah. So this really gives us an opportunity to work together to benefit the basin. And then the next project is just downstream of Laughing Jacobs Lake. So currently there's a very straightened kind of grassed channel that discharges from the lake. We propose to implement some vegetation around that, which is a very simple idea. It kind of takes the channel back to a native establishment, and then that vegetation would also reduce exposure to sunlight, driving the temperature down of the water, which benefits aquatic life downstream. And the last project is the Issaquah Pine Lake Road Crossing Engineered Hyperaric Zone Augmentation, which is a lot. It's a mouthful for sure. So a hyperaric zone is a in-stream feature that forces water under the stream bed, so into like gravel or a permeable layer, and that gravel can remove pollutants in the stormwater. And UW is actually doing some studies with this, and there may be some preliminary evidence that this is effective against 6-PPE quinone, which is the tire pollutant that everybody has been talking about that is harmful to coho salmon. So that's a biggie. So these 6 projects were ranked using the criteria that Toby outlined earlier. The 2 top scoring ones were the sphagnum bogs. Those are the Queens Bog and the Southeast 24th Street wetland area. So those ranked highest among the 6 projects.
We'll jump into next steps now. as we look at the projects, I did want to add a couple notes. One being that we tried to pick, realistic projects, frankly. We wanted things that were buildable, things that we could achieve. Every city's got a raft of plans that are, doing a little more than propping up doors. We want something that's doable. So that was a real focus in the initial identification of projects that we could carry out. The second one too is, being realistic about real estate requirements and what have you. The likelihood of purchasing land, condemning property is a tall hurdle. So we tried to be cognizant of that reality as well. Yeah, we think we came up with a real, wide-ranging mix of projects that are achievable. It's really the goal of the project here. And shifting gears into our next steps here, I kind of wanted to, walk you through where we began, really starting with the webinar we had last October. As Joel noted, that was kind of a one-way push of information to the public. We did receive a fair amount of public comment through that. One of the promises we made during that was to get our Sammamish comment page up and running for this. That's still a work in progress, but we are committing to getting that done here within the next couple of weeks. As a result of the feedback we received there, as well as just the project efforts, we did develop a draft report. Joel sent that over a couple of weeks ago for circulation internally, as well as for feedback and comment from the city of Issaquah. So we're in the process of getting that initial internal staff review completed. And that brings us to number 2, the blue item, with the council meeting tonight, just to kind of bring you up to speed on where we are and where we're going. The next effort will be completely posting the draft Basin plan online on the Connect Sammamish page. And then we will, formally encourage public comment after that. The idea that we want to have some, formalized framework for getting feedback. So we're going to try to keep that open for 2 weeks. And then the red 4 indicates kind of the wrap up of that process. I think at that point we should have, a fair amount of comment. I know there's members in the community that have asked about it. When can we see a draft? So looking forward to getting that kind of feedback. Through that process too, the purple revision I've identified, we'll be making updates to the plan just to get it, incorporating any comments. And with that, we will get the comments posted, responding to the public feedback we get, as well as any additional thoughts that trickle in. The next milestone we have is the blue 6. That represents the next council meeting where we will formally provide the draft plan to council. You'll have a copy of that in your packets, obviously, for review in advance. The intent there is this ultimately needs to be adopted. It makes sense to provide a draft as well as a final. So that's the process there. The final report then will incorporate whatever comments council members make, as well as any further comments from the public. And those will be wrapped up, and a final document will be available tentatively on March 8th. That'll lead to a March 15th council session for final adoption on consent agenda. And then our last item there, number 9, is getting this online and available to the public as a finished document, at the end of March. So hopefully that's a lot of pieces fitting together there over the next couple of months, but hopefully that illustrates where we're headed with it. With that concludes our formal presentation. There's probably a few questions as well. Joel and I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. This was obviously a very comprehensive project to undertake. So I want to turn it over to council for any questions. Councilmember Howe.
Thank you for that report. It was very helpful for me to understand as a new person coming to the council. Where I'm trying to figure out is you've done the plan. Okay, I'm moving ahead. We get the plan done, and then what? And say, at what point does that gets picked up, I'm assuming, and it gets implemented by staff or by a collection of consultants or staff? And I'm wondering, is it, when you looked at your prioritization of things, did you also kind of cherry pick or identify the low hanging fruit? Was there anything there that was just like, you do this first and it's a quick win? So that's question number one. And number two is that I have talked to some residents about Laughing Jacobs Creek, and just when it decides it's going to overflow, it can really overflow. So I had a question about the culvert system in particular. And has that been studied and looked at? And are you working with the residents that align along there that are in a flood area?
No, those are good questions. We'll tackle the flooding one first. I know there's a couple crossings on Issaquah Pine Lake Road that are vulnerable. Those are really the big, that causes a very significant backup as it drains. And, the nature of the project of repairing one of these culverts independently, the cost of doing that would probably be 3 times what it would be if it were incorporated into a broader road project. So, we kind of dismissed that out of hand as a viable project, if you will. And it particularly makes sense given, the direction of, transportation plan and what have you, and likelihood that we'll have a road project in the future. So there's also flooding, I know, kind of on the north side of Southeast 24th. Some of those almost like driveways, these long roadways that extend up into that area on the north side of that particular sphagnum bog. And that water level is actually, there's really not much we can do about it. We can put bigger culverts in, but all that will do is have a bigger area to rise and fall in concert with the water downstream of there. There's not much, from a hydraulic grade line standpoint that we can do to alter the impacts on some of those properties. Having said that, we haven't done a real detailed study of it, but investigating the topography of it and just recognizing how flat that area is, there's some limitations that we, really we're bumping up against. And then in terms of low-hanging fruit, I think I mentioned that we did try to pick reasonable projects. The channel, vegetation, what have you, that is a real low-cost project that will deliver, bang for the buck. Right now, it's essentially a grassline ditch. The biggest challenge would probably be, private property access, but enhancing buffers like that it pays real dividends for a low cost. And help me understand the first question again. I've already forgotten.
I was basically, it's great to have a plan, and I'm trying to figure out when does the work start, and that's probably not your. It's not your. It's probably not to you, but I'll ask the mayor just because I'm new and trying to figure this out.
Sure.
If you don't mind, I'd like to take the answer if I could.
Anyone.
Go for it, Jeff.
I'll let Audrey speak to the issue and introduce the fact that we'll be dealing with a stormwater rate update this year, and that's where projects come into play. So Audrey, you want to just touch on that? Because I think that'll answer Karen's question.
Absolutely. This is something that's on the city's work plan within Public Works for this year is putting together a rate study that's based on level of service for the utility for council to consider. So we might have a baseline level of service that just meets our permit requirements, and council may elect to choose varying levels of service built on that. Within those levels of service, we will provide different options for our capital projects. Of course, utilizing our criteria that was developed with each basin plan, kind of compiling those into a larger list from our basin plans that we've recently completed, and building those into a capital improvement plan, and then adding in potential layers of service for different rates for council to consider. So this will all be part of bigger planning efforts in 2022.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Howe, I'd add a couple things there. There's, the basin plans, obviously. The retrofit plan identifies a number of projects as well. We also have a neighborhood drainage program, which kind of was a big map. If you come upstairs at City Hall, that identifies dozens of problem areas that kind of prioritized, consistent with the the categorization that we've gone through, and all of those will get rolled in into the capital plan. So that's the sausage making, if you will. So.
Thank you. Very helpful.
I don't see any more council hands up. So kind of one last call for any questions for staff. Councilmember Lamb.
This isn't specifically about Latham Jacobs. I was just seeing that the first basin plan, Zacchaeus, was adopted in 2019. And I guess I was just wondering, like, does this mirror what was done in 2019 and how successful that was in 2019?
Yeah, it's part of the kind of the sequence we had decided on was initiating a basin plan every year and a half, roughly. This was done under my predecessor, Danica Klobuchar. But yeah, that was really the first one. That Thompson Inglewood was done actually a little bit earlier than that. But each one of those identified specific projects. As I mentioned, the George Davis Creek, the Fish Passage project, that was a basin plan identified project. The Lewis Thompson Road, for example, was identified in the basin plan for Zacchaeus Creek. So yeah, there's real projects coming to fruition in response to the basin planning efforts. But yeah, you're right. This is kind of in sequence with Zacchaeus. So I don't know if that answers your question, Councilmember Lamb.
I was just wondering how successful Zacchaeus, the plan was for that.
And from the standpoint, I guess we'd measure the success by, how accessible we are at advancing these projects. And the Lewis Thompson Road one, real high, relatively high cost. And we've been able to move that one forward. So I think from that benchmark, we characterize it as a success.
I could also just chime in too. These basin plans are really kind of the foundation or that first glance at the health of that basin. And they provide a priority list of projects for us. Through that criteria, then, as Toby was just mentioning for Lewis Thompson Road, we were able to utilize that criteria and that ranking from that plan to help us secure grant funding and partnerships for this upcoming project that'll be occurring in 2022, 23, and 24. So it's a great amount of work, and they're typically done, this isn't just kind of, they'll be done over time. So we'll circle back, in maybe 10 years and probably look at this basin again in detail, but they are meant to evolve over time, but this is kind of the first detailed look at this basin.
Thank you. Third item I'd point to that we're, conducting as a result of the planning is significantly more water quality monitoring, and flow monitoring. So those are things that we really didn't do, several years ago. But we've kind of upped that game as a result of the basin planning and, pointing out the value of that information. So one more element I'd point to.
Councilmember Howe?
Sorry, one last question. Do you ever partner with other organizations that are on the Sammamish Plateau that do things like habitat restoration and so forth? Is there an opportunity for volunteers, I guess, but in particular when you were talking about the vegetation component, putting in native plants? I know that we have groups here that would sign up for that. Is there an opportunity for that?
Well, that's a great question and great point too. I think the volunteer programs within the city are traditionally run through parks, and they have done some coordination work on some of our projects already. The original Zacchaeus Creek plan. I know we coordinated with the tribe, the Snoqualmie tribe. They have, an organization internally that, they'll provide manpower, a certain amount of funding and what have you. And we, utilize that help, for part of the vegetation reestablishment adjacent to the creek. So they're, and they reached out to us, trying to figure out how we can make this work again on George Davis Creek. So there's a real, we try to leverage those opportunities. Some of those big capital projects, it's a bit of a challenge because you got a big contractor and, they struggle to, work around a group of volunteers. But yeah, a lot of the smaller programs, the neighborhood ones and that are good opportunities for volunteer work. Glad you pointed that out.
Thank you.
I don't see any more hands raised, so thank you to staff and our consultant for coming by and giving us this presentation and this very heavy lift, which is at least we'll go through the first quarter of this year before we finalize it. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Council member.
So Council, I might suggest we take a 5-minute break here before we delve into the unfinished business. It's almost 8:45, so if we can just say we'll be back here at 8:50, so 6 minutes, if that's okay. Okay, let's take a quick break. Council, it is 8:50. I'm not sure if we have everybody back. You can pop your camera on so I know you're back and that we have a quorum. It looks like we have a quorum. Councilmember Gamblin, are you back? Not yet. Councilmember Moran, are you back there? Not yet. Councilmember Treen. I don't even see Councilmember Treen listed on here anymore. We'll give them one more minute and we'll get rolling here. We do have a quorum so we can go, but all right, looks like we lost Councilmember Treen. I don't see him at all on the screen. Do we have Councilmember Moran back yet or not yet? No?
Not yet.
Okay, well, it's 8:52. Or hopefully she's rolling back in here. Our next order of business is the discussion for guidance on the 2022 farmers market. I believe we have Anjali Meyer and Chris Jordan.
That's correct. We'll promote her to a panelist. There you go.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, Mr. City Manager. I'm Anjali Meyer, Director of Parks, Recreation and Facilities. And tonight we are seeking guidance from City Council on how you would like to proceed with the farmers market this year. We have two options. You could either authorize staff to issue a request for proposals, what we refer to as an RFP, to solicit proposals from qualified vendors to run a market, or we could allow the vendor from last year to issue a special use permit again and operate a market this year. Joining me tonight is Chris Jordan, our Recreation and Cultural Services Manager. I will turn it over to him for a short presentation.
Thank you, Anjali.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for allowing me to present to you today. I'll be providing some brief information on Sammamish Farmers Market and looking for guidance on how to proceed this year. This evening, staff is looking for direction to issue an RFP to seek proposals from qualified vendors to run a farmers market or to allow the 21 vendor to submit a special use permit to operate the farmers market in 2022. Here's a brief history of the Sammamish Farmers Market. In 2007, an MOU was created between the city and Sammamish Chamber of Commerce to develop a market to happen at Sammamish Commons. Since 2009 to 2019, the city contracted with the chamber to operate the market. During this 11-year period, the city paid the chamber $10,000 each year for managing the market on the plaza. In 2020, all events and programs on city property were canceled due to COVID, which included the farmers market. Then this last year, the city issued an RFP to operate the market and only received one response, which was the chamber. The city authorized the chamber to operate the market through a special use permit, and no funding was given to the chamber in 2020 and 2021. Responsibilities from the chamber and the city from 2009 through 2019. The chamber offered 20 market dates that span from May to September. The chamber is responsible for acquiring volunteers, sponsors, and vendors to provide marketing and promotions, to secure permits, to do setup and takedown for each market day, and to provide reports on market performance and financials. The city's responsibilities included funding support of $10,000 each year, to provide staff support for signage and market layout, to provide storing and transporting event trailer, and to provide garbage containers and liners for the market. This past year, the chamber provided 16 market dates from June through September. The chamber is responsible for everything related to the market, which included all equipment, all trash collection, all setup and cleanup, securing parking options and signage. The city only provided transport of event trailer onto the plaza on the first market to correctly place it in front of the restrooms and just manage the logistic requirements included in the contract with the chamber. The chamber followed all COVID guidelines put out by the CDC and King County Health Department. Also followed all city rules and policies. The market season went well in a shortened season and through another COVID summer. There was no issues, and feedback from the community was that they were just glad to have a farmers market back, which brought back a little normalcy during the pandemic. So council, staff is looking for guidance for the farmers market this year. Staff can issue an RFP to allow qualified vendors to apply to run and operate the market. Then select the vendor will submit a special use permit application with a signed agreement. Or staff would allow last year's vendor, the chamber, to submit a special use permit application with a signed agreement to operate the farmers market this year. Thank you.
Mayor, this is back to you to facilitate a dialogue and give us direction. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can, just because for council's viewpoint, all we see is unless I can change my view, all I see is the screen rather than being able to see my fellow council members. Council, do you have questions for staff? Councilmember Howe.
Well, excuse me, I'm sorry. As I understand it, it's a tough, you can't really make money off of this. It looks like it's something that's pretty much either a break-even enterprise if you run it well. And what I also understand is that the vendors are charged kind of below market rate, actually. So in order to encourage more vendors to show up and to stay with the farmers market, I believe that they are actually charged a lower rate. Would we have a concern that if we did an RFP proposal, for example, that we'd get someone in that potentially raised the rates or tried to make a profit on this?
So I can take that. There's a possibility. We just don't know who be the vendors that apply for it. So that's something we couldn't answer till during this kind of the selection process and stuff.
Thank you.
Councilmember Lamb.
So it sounds like there was a RFP request before. Why are we issuing one? Why are we asking for RFPs again if there only one person responded, and that was the chamber? And it sounds like last year it was really successful. I'm just trying to understand why we're redoing something like this again.
This was a controversial issue, council member, and it was requested that we bring it back for a council decision and direction rather than staff making a determination on this issue. That's why it's before you.
So I'd like to make a motion if there aren't any more questions. I would move that we allow the 2021 vendor, which was the Sammamish Chamber, to run the 2022 farmers market and forego the RFP process.
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. I didn't hear any nays, so I'm assuming that was a 7-0 vote. The Sammamish Chamber will be running our 2022 farmers market again.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is the King County Sheriff's Office lease agreement. Anjali, is this you again?
Yes, and give me just a minute. I'll share my screen. Let me know if I've done this right.
We can see it.
And do you see it in a presentation mode or?
We can see the slides running along the side. Okay. But if you have notes, we're not seeing those. There we go.
Okay. All right. Good evening again, Madam Mayor, City Council, Mr. City Manager. I'm Anjali Maya, Director of Parks, Recreation and Facilities, presenting your next topic as well, which is the proposed amendment to the lease agreement with the King County Sheriff's Office. Also tonight in attendance is Chief Pingree, our Chief of Police for the Sammamish Police Department. So I have a short presentation for you, and at the end of it, both of us could take questions. So I will give you some background on the terms of the original agreement, provide a refresher on the notice of termination that Council authorized more than a year ago, and walk you through the proposed amendment tonight. And then the objective of tonight's presentation is to see if Council is comfortable authorizing the City Manager to amend the existing lease agreement with the King County Sheriff's Office. So the city has leased space within City Hall to King County for use by the Sheriff's Office for more than a decade now. It's the west wing at the upper floor of City Hall. And this lease brings in rental income and gives the city access to King County Sheriff's Office resources. The term consists of an initial 10-year term, which is almost complete, as well as 2 optional 10-year extensions. It includes roughly 5,200 square feet of office space on the 2nd floor of City Hall, as well as secured parking for about 36 vehicles. And the county pays rent as well as a proportionate share of the operating costs. Over the years, the city's need for additional workspace and parking for employees has gone up considerably. And so the city, with council's authorization, provided King County with a notice to terminate the lease back in May of 2020. Subsequent to that, we completed a draft internal space needs analysis based on our current and projected needs over the next decade and determined that we would in fact need all the lease space for our own use. However, currently the city is assessing potential telework arrangements resulting from the pandemic, which may enable us to accommodate our needs with a smaller footprint. So we have paused planning for any renovations to City Hall. We are proposing an amendment to the current lease to allow additional time for the city to determine its space needs and then negotiate a new lease with the county should we have capacity to continue to accommodate the Sheriff's Office at City Hall. So the proposed amendment is to extend the term to 3 years, commencing next month, and also allow 2 additional extensions for a period of 1 year each. And the rest of the terms are largely the same as the original agreement. We will continue to receive rent and a share of the operating costs. And one of the terms that we are including in the amendment that we will be able to negotiate a premise reduction with the sheriff's office. They have agreed that they can work with a smaller footprint, but that they would like no less than 3,000 square feet. They currently use 5,200 square feet, so they have agreed to move to a smaller footprint and also use less parking stalls. So in lieu of the 36 stalls that they have, they would be able to work with about 20 stalls. So the next steps are, if council authorizes the amendment to the lease tonight, we would continue with working on our space needs analysis based on an adopted telework policy. We would then be able to negotiate a space reduction with the county if it is still feasible, and bring back a new lease agreement to City Council at a future date. Should City Council not be comfortable amending the lease, then the lease would terminate, and the county could continue to stay on based on a holdover clause in the lease, and they would pay 125% of the rent, and it would be a month-to-month lease at that point. But it is more than likely then the sheriff's office would relocate to another location. So that brings us back to the question tonight. If council is comfortable with what you heard, of course, we'd open it up for questions, but we are looking for an authorization for the city manager to amend the existing lease agreement with the sheriff's office.
Thanks, Anjali. So I'll turn it over to council for questions. I'm not seeing any. Anjali, I have a question. I asked it yesterday during our agenda meeting. I was just curious about the delta between the requirement for the city to provide 15 months of prior notice while the county only has to provide 12. I was just kind of curious why they weren't the same.
I believe our original agreement had 12 months and we left it that way. That was enough for the city. The county came back as we were working through all our edits. They were a little nervous about the time they would need to find an alternate location for them to be able to find the location and move out of City Hall. So they requested 15 months. We didn't go back and update our 15 months. We can do that if it's important, or leave it as is.
No, I was just curious as to the difference more than anything, if there was a rationale, and it sounds like there is. So, and then for whatever it's worth for council's benefit, yesterday during the agenda meeting, I also asked questions about, there was, the concern that we did not have enough space at City Hall, but COVID has obviously turned everything a little bit on its head. And I think the questions I asked the city manager were relative to the what if scenario, not knowing what the future looks like with the Omicron variant and whether or not, originally staff were going to be coming back in. It sounds like the city manager is confident that should we need this space, that it's there for us, obviously, given the provisions in the lease agreement, but he did not foresee us needing that space for the 3-year term. So
that's correct. I think that our telework policy, the change of the world and how people function and remote working, being conscientious of spacing between individuals and phasing that back in, we'll have enough room and we'll have enough reaction time to be able to do that. One of the other favorable things with this lease is that we get some parking spaces back that will allow us to move cars out of the basement into the outside parking area and free up parking for our own employees so that we're not scalping what we use for the public lot out in front. So there are some advantages. And as I described and discussed with the deputy mayor and mayor, is that these changes brought on this extension by COVID, and also the charter amendment changes here at the county for an appointed and or elected sheriff. And now we have an appointed sheriff, and there were a number of concerns by communities of how that's going to work out. The process is working very well, but we still don't have a sheriff yet. And what is that new sheriff going to think about that precinct being here located at Sammamish? It works fine. It's been very favorable, but the new sheriff may have a different concept. The new sheriff may say they want to move it somewhere else. So this provides the county flexibility, it provides the city flexibility, and when we do go to make the move, there are budgetary considerations that the council will have to contemplate.
Mr. City Manager, I wondered if you could clarify the parking spaces that we gain back. Are those the ones that are behind City Hall in the gated area, or?
That's correct.
Yes, Anjali's nodding. Okay.
No, you are correct. Yep.
Great. Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, I move that the City Council authorize the City Manager to amend the existing lease agreement with King County Sheriff's Office to allow more time for the city to evaluate the staff needs for office space and for parking, and to negotiate a new lease with King County's Sheriff's Office if feasible.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Treen, did you want to speak to your motion? Nope. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? By a vote of 7-0, we have authorized that contract extension. Thank you, Anjali, again.
Yeah, thank you, Council.
Okay, our next item of business is the contract amendment for Anglican Whited. Mr. City Manager, are you taking this one?
Yes, I have this one. I'm just looking to see if my notes are right here. No, you're gonna have to help me. On this issue, we had a spreadsheet provided in the agenda report that showed that we've gone back through and looked at all of the numbers. What was happening is that we had a couple gaps in time in which bills overcame the amount that was contracted for. You recall we're dark during August, and we had bills that come in always in arrears, and that created us to go into this into the red on some of the payments, and then we'd bring back in the contract. Council members were ultimately correct. There was about a $399.90 that we ended up being in total in the red on, and then we bringing back the larger contract so that we can handle this last approximately $15,000 in bills that are due and payable. So you have the summary there. I think we've tried to disclose just what's been going on. One of the billing issues caught up with us, I think, in December for the $12,000 and $2,000 bill that we just received, because we had already met and couldn't go back and bring forward the billing as we were trying to catch up on this thing. So anything more to add to that, Scott? I think I've tried to cover it for you, Council, but there may still be questions.
Councilmember Lamb.
I don't see any sort of spreadsheet that you were referring to, City Manager, regarding payment, like history.
Yeah, it wasn't in the agenda, Bill.
Councilmember Lamb, this is Deputy City Manager Scott McCall. I responded to a email from Councilmember Clark from earlier this afternoon, and it was to all the City Council, and it included a spreadsheet at Councilmember Clark's request. It included the spreadsheet where all the billing, all the way back to the original contract, the start of the original contracts for the Anglican Whited contract. It was sent at about 2:30 this afternoon. And apologies that it didn't come sooner. And if you haven't had a chance to see it, we're happy to follow up with any of you.
I have a question for you. I did not see the email, but I do have a question because I noted in the agenda bill, the supplemental agreement is talking about a very specific contract. And there, if you can just tell me in your email, did you have all 3 contracts listed in there? Because there's 3 separate contracts that we've done, correct?
Yes, we did. And I'll let Scott speak to it specifically as he drafted the spreadsheet up and the report.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Mayor, to answer your question, yes, all of the contracts, they're listed essentially in sequential order. And it's essentially what Councilmember Clark requested was in sequential order. So when the initial contract happened and then draws against that from the bills received. And so anytime there was an amendment to the different specific contracts, those are in the running total in that spreadsheet. And so you will see all the different contracts, both the amendments and when new contracts were approved by council and the running total that's connected with that. And again, my apologies for that coming out later this afternoon for you all, some of you not having a chance to review that.
Since I didn't see that email, what is the running total to Eaglet and Whited?
So as the city manager previously stated, as of the last payment that was made to the Eaglet and Whited contract, we were over by about $399. Since then, we have received a couple of bills since the last council meeting in December for the most recent 2 months for a total of $12,575 and $2,907.50. So that puts us at a total of about 15,000, not about, but specifically 15,882 and 47 beyond the current amount that is available for us to pay from a contract. So that's why there's a proposed amendment in front of you to be able to pay these bills, recognizing that attorney law firms bill in arrears. And so sometimes we have to catch up a little bit to when the bills come in.
So I'm looking for the total amount, the total amount, not
the
just
total
like
authorized amount, I believe, is $799,999.
$800,000
shy.
That's correct.
Is that right? Does that match what you have?
I'm doing a little quick math in my head here.
Okay.
But I would say just to recognize that is since April of 2020.
Yep.
Two fiscal years.
Yeah, I believe the mayor is correct in that.
So the amendment is for 250,000, but we just.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead and complete your question.
So the amendment is for 250,000, but it sounds like, I may be incorrect, maybe I just misheard that it's like we're expecting about $15,000. So why is it 250? I mean, there's a big difference. Could it be less than asking for 250?
Council member, you'll have, after the payment of that bill, yes, you'll have about $235,000 for the firm to work against. We have ongoing litigation under the Growth Management Hearing Board. That's up for appeal, and there's legal bills related to that, and a large portion of what they've worked on is the STCA development. And we're working with STCA to try to resolve issues there. But this has been an expensive process to go through, and I think it's prudent on the amount we've recognized so that we don't overrun these bills and we don't have to come back each month. But if it's the desire of the body, we can go with lesser amounts and do it more frequently. But the bills do mount up when there's ongoing litigation. They mount up quickly.
So I'm more comfortable with a lesser amount. Do I need to make an amendment or motion that?
You would make a motion if you want to.
Okay, I would like to motion that we table this until next week. I'd like to have the opportunity to look at all payments to all our legal firms in a spreadsheet.
We have to have a second before we can have a discussion.
I would second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Lamb, do you want to speak to your motion?
I'm new to council and I've seen bits and pieces of emails and how much we paid, and there's contracts, and I just want a full, complete picture of all the different law firms that we are paying and what they've done. And I think that that is just information that we need to understand how much money we're paying for lawsuits and lawyer fees.
Councilmember Treen.
Yeah, I'll be voting against tabling this. We've waited long enough to pay these guys for the work they've been doing and the services they've been providing for us. So I will be voting against this.
Councilmember Howe.
Councilmember Trina, I can understand that and appreciate that point of view, because paying bills on time is a very important thing. But I think that I would add to Amy's motion that we're able to also get an estimate as to when we're going to be done. I'd like to see a timeline and an expectation of how much of what we're in for and how much longer we're going to be in. I realize that's hard to calculate, but not impossible. I think that is something that could be approximated so that the council has full knowledge and understanding of what we're in for.
Councilmember Moran.
Perhaps we could make the friendly amendment that we pay the amount that is due and not put, and not make the overage amount, the amount that we want to balance forward or budget forward, not make that amount and have that discussion next week, but we need to pay the bills that are due. That's a much smaller amount. I mean, I think we're talking, what, 15,000 or something? Mm-hmm. We need to pay that.
That's correct.
I mean, that
I'll second that amendment.
Okay, so the amendment has been moved and seconded. Councilmember Miranda, do you want to speak to your amendment? It sounds like you kind of already did, but.
Yes, I just feel like we need to pay the $15,000 of bills that are just due. I totally understand wanting to get a grasp and a better understanding of what's out, who the different attorneys are, who's working on what should we look at for budgeting forward. I get all that. I totally get that. And having a week to do that, I get all that. But with that, I think we should pay with the $15,000 that's due, and then we can look forward. But we shouldn't penalize them by not paying their bills for it.
I agree.
So I do want to make a quick comment. I'm supportive of the amendment on the floor. I do think there may be a way to move all of this forward. And Mr. City Manager, I'd look for your guidance here. I see we have Carrie Sand on the phone. We could go back into executive session and have a discussion on this that might better inform our council members, or if more appropriate, that could be done out here on the dais. But I think there's probably a lack of understanding as to where we're at in a process standpoint from the Growth Hearings Board. And the other items listed on the supplemental agreement relative to this contract. I also noted and wanted to ask, because it says STCA litigation. There's no STCA litigation, is there? There's the appeal, but is there a litigation?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. If you want to go into an executive session, I think we need to schedule that for next week so that we can have legal counsel present that is actually handling this and can dissect this for all of the council. because it is quite complex. There is ongoing legal support necessary on the STCA matter because a number of issues were in dispute regarding what the results came out of with the hearing officer. And on that issue, it's nuanced. So separate from the Growth Management Hearing Board, but it's the same attorney firm handling it. And there is some crossover because STCA joined with the hearing board on some of the issues that were involved. So it's, we need to have Eglick and Whitehead, I think, present to help the council with the history on this issue.
Okay, that might be helpful then if we can see if we can get them next week. And I see Carrie has popped on. I don't know if she had a comment or not, but.
Good evening, Mayor Malchow and everyone. Nice to meet all of you. Just wanted to introduce myself. I'm interim city attorney Carrie Sand, and just echoing the comments made by City Manager Rudat just now. It would be helpful to have the attorneys actually handling this matter, who this contract is with, present to speak with the council. So if council wants to have an executive session and invite them to attend that, I think that makes abundant sense. If we were to stop proceedings and have that tonight, it just wouldn't be as effective of a conversation without them present. Just wanted to chime in and add that. Nice to meet all of you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Carrie. Okay, so
Mayor, if I can add, the payment of the bill is also nuanced by the fact that they wouldn't have a current contract under which to work, and we would properly need to stop them from doing any work. I think that puts the city in jeopardy, and I would recommend not doing that. If I think we should pay the bill. I think we should have some cushion right now so that they can continue working and not work outside of an approved contract that only the council can approve, because there is the ongoing litigation with the Court of Appeals, as well as any issues on the EIS, which they are involved in, and counseling with providing legal counsel on the negotiations with STCA and the development.
Mr. City Manager, what would your recommendation be then if you were to make one, as far as something over the 16,000 to kind of cover that gap until, assuming the original motion passes, which was, all attorneys' bills kind of be consolidated in a rundown for council, what would your recommendation be?
Well, I would say to cover all the bases, because I don't know. Work slowed down significantly in December on the Court of Appeals. I've not kept on that. We've got Bluma to go through. $50,000 gives us some breathing room for the legal counsel to work with, and for us to feel confident on anything. Should it reach that? No, but I'm not going to make a recommendation of 25,000 or even 30,000, because I don't know. And in the scope of things, 50,000 is not a significant number, considering where we've been and where we're going to be going, unless the council pulls the Court of Appeals case. We still have the ongoing negotiations and advice on the EIS matter. Thank you.
All right, well, we currently have an amendment on the floor, which is to authorize the current bills due, which totals, Scott, I think you rattled it off. It's somewhere in the vicinity of 16,000, but I feel like the amendment should have a definitive dollar figure attached to it.
Thank you, Mayor. The total amount is $15,882.47.
Say that one more time. 15,008.
$882.47.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the amendment is to pay the bills, which totals $15,882.47. Unless, okay, we've got more discussion. Councilmember Treen.
Well, I was just going to ask if Karen Moran were to actually add on to her amendment an additional 50,000, does that cover it on the amendment then? What the city manager is asking us to do?
Well,
or
we can have another amendment.
Say it again.
We can have another amendment, so you could make another amendment.
Or do we just vote the whole thing down?
She can withdraw her amendment and make another one.
Why don't I remove my amendment and I'll make a new amendment?
Who seconded the amendment, though?
I did.
Kent did.
Okay, are you willing to let her withdraw it?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
So I'm removing my amendment and I'm going to replace it with an amendment that states that we will pay the bills in the amount of
$15,882.47.
exactly, and a $50K amount so that the attorneys can continue to work while we have a chance to look at the balances and discuss.
Okay, we need a second before we can have discussion on the amendment.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Now you may speak to your amendment.
Okay. So anyway, that would give us a chance to look at everything and actually analyze. We'll do exactly what you guys wanted to do, and without having to stop the attorneys.
Okay. So any further discussion? Councilmember Tree, your hand's still up. Do you have discussion on this? No. Deputy Mayor Clark.
Sorry. So the total is 50,000 plus the 15, so it's like 65,000 total. Is that correct? Cool. Thank you.
So I do have one comment, and I think in recognition of what Councilmember Lamb was attempting to do, which was table all of this until we could kind of reconcile everything, have a powwow. I don't estimate that we're going to blow through $50,000 in 1 week's time. And so I think that number is maybe a little high given what Councilmember Lamb was attempting to accomplish. I mean, it's not a crazy number, but I think we're trying to wrap our arms around escalating legal fees on a multitude of fronts. And I don't want to stop them from working either. I think if in December, if we had a total of 15.8 worth of legal bills, we're not going to incur a bill. I assume they bill in arrears and they bill at the end of the month. We're not going to incur a bill in the middle of the week. Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct, Mayor.
Do we know when we get bills from? If we just found out this week about our December bill, we're not going to get a January bill till February, correct?
I'm not probably. I don't know. You know, they had been running behind in accumulating their bills, and what they accumulated in December, maybe they did that and it was low work and it cleaned out the whole month of December. I haven't seen those bills, so I don't know the dates on them, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, and I understand too, likewise, Mr. City Manager, that without an additional padding over what they're paying in bills, then we essentially don't have a contract for them to do work under, and I do understand that, but my guess is that we've incurred bills already that we will get regardless if we put a screeching halt on it. I guess I recognize Councilmember Lamb's concerns and interest, and I think it's important that we get all of that attorney information and the billing. Is that something that staff's able to do next week?
Do what next week? We can get the attorneys and attempt to get the attorneys on board. We can try and quantify what the path has been so that we have a historical summary to do that briefing on. And with legal counsel, we can accomplish that, I think.
So, okay, I'll ask my question in a second when we're actually talking about the main motion.
All right,
so,
thank you.
Okay, so amendment on the floor is basically $65,882.47. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we have the $65,882.47. So now we're back to the main motion as amended. And the main motion was Councilmember Leon wanted to table everything until we had all the attorney's bills. So as amended, we have basically are paying this bill, but we are still asking for the staff to be able to gather up all the attorney bills from all the various places and give those to council. Did I state that correctly, Councilmember Lamb? She's nodding, yes. Okay. Is there any discussion on the main motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, ayes have it. The motion passes as amended.
Thank you, Mayor. We will do our best to see if we can get that information pulled together. So I'm looking, we've got a couple work days left. We'll try to make it on the 11th. If we look like we're going to be delayed, we'll definitely get it on for the 18th. Is that okay? And the availability of the attorneys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is legal support for public works construction projects on the Lane Powell on-call contract. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. We are trying to get our house in order, and what we had here was just a breakdown in communications regarding the contract with the firm Lane Powell. As you may recall, we brought that firm on board to help us with the Issaquah Fall City Road contract, in which we had issues with our utility company that went back from the beginning before we even started on the project. And then we needed to amend that contract. We brought it back to council. Staff, including the attorney's office, didn't catch this, but staff had generated other contracts based on a task order and project-oriented focus, not on the totality of the contract. And to be honest, I didn't catch it when it got to my desk either. And we ended up with a couple of contracts for the 49.99, and they were set there at that 49, so we don't exceed the 50,000. But also because of what was involved with Issaquah Fall City Road and the completion of Southeast 4th. And then we came along with, got a contract for Ebright Creek and the culvert replacement project. And those contracts were also let. So what we've done here, when I looked at the summary that was provided, a former council member Stewart had asked about these lower amount contracts, and it stood out to me, and I thought there was just a mistake of two contracts for the 49.9, and there weren't. It was separate contracts. So that caused us to go back and look to see what had happened. We discovered what had happened, and we're trying to correct that and have a better tallying system and tracking system. We've met internally, and we think we have it laid out so that the department must go through our staff in the manager's office to review those contracts, look at the amounts, coordinate with finance before it even gets to my desk. So this is a recommendation to consolidate all of these contracts that should not have been let individually because they exceeded the 50,000. Should have come back to council for further amendments even beyond what we did on the Issaquah Falls City Road and Southeast 4th. I hope that provides adequate explanation.
So, Mr. City Manager, I do have a question. So this is, if I can, is this retroactive that we're doing this? Because I'm looking at the contract numbers and they're dating back into 2020. Are we retroactively approving contracts that are already out there, or proactively getting out and doing additional contracts?
No, we're not retroactively approving. In a matter of speaking, yes, you are. What we're doing is consolidating all of those contract and the contracts amounts because it is with a single vendor. Had they been a different attorney firms, there wouldn't be any problem with it. But because of the way our municipal code is and adhering to that, because it is a single vendor, they should have come back to the council for additional supplemental amounts under a single contract.
Got it. Council, are there other questions, or I'd entertain a motion on this? Deputy Mayor Clark?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to reallocate for the 244998.
Second.
I think I heard a second. I'm not sure who that was.
It was me.
Okay, your microphone's super quiet on my end. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it by a vote of 7-0. We have approved that budget reallocation for $244,998.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Sorry for the error, and we'll endeavor to do better.
Our next item of business under new business is external committee appointments. Is this Mike Sugg that's taking this?
Yes, Mayor. Mike, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council. I believe that our city clerk is trying to transfer me to a panelist right now. I do apologize. I've been having some technical issues this evening. But in the meantime, I will just keep going. My name is Mike Sugg. I am your Senior Management Analyst. And this agenda, I don't know if I'm still talking. There we go. Okay.
Yep,
there we are. This agenda item provides an opportunity for the council to determine which members to appoint to their external committees. As noted in the agenda bill, there are two categories of external committees: those that are appointed by Sound Cities Association and those that are appointed by council directly. The Sound Cities Association appointment process was completed in the fall, and the resulting membership on those committees is included in tonight's agenda bill. The direct council-made appointments are what we're discussing tonight. And due to the retirement of 3 council members, there are a number of vacant seats on these committees that need to be reappointed. Additional membership changes beyond just replacing the retired members can also be made if desired. To help with the council's discussion, I have a table that we can pull up to fill in the 2022 appointments as they're determined. One moment, please. And the highlighted cells on this table show the retired members that need to be replaced, and the alt designation that you see next to some names signifies that there's an alternate member who will attend the meetings in the absence of the primary member. Additional information about each of these committees is included as an exhibit to tonight's agenda bill. And with that said, I will turn it back to the mayor for discussion on the council's preferences for these seats.
Thanks for that visual, Mike. I think that's helpful for those of us who are very visual. So council, all of these committees, these external committees, I think maybe the easiest way to work through this is just go committee by committee or find out who's interested in what committees. As Mike stated, all these committees are available to all council members, but it might be helpful to understand who has desires and interests on these particular committees, because it may facilitate us moving through these quicker. So why don't we just do a round robin, and I'm just going to go in the order in which I see you on my screen. So Deputy Mayor Clark, are there particular committees to which you're interested in? And Mike, if there's any possibility of kind of filling in names on the side, maybe to the right of the 22 members, just so we can kind of keep track of who's interested.
Yep, I can do that. Let me just add a column here.
Yeah, thank you. So I am interested in Eastside Fire and Rescue Board.
Are there any others that you're also interested in, just so we can kind of populate?
No.
Okay. Councilmember Lamb, you're the next one I see on my screen. Which committees?
I don't see PIC on here.
I don't see the Public Issues Committee on this either. Good catch. Mike, can we pop that on the bottom?
Yes, we can. My apologies.
No worries.
So that's the one I'm interested in.
Okay, Councilmember Train, you're the next one I see. Which committees are you interested in?
Interested in PIC, East Side Transportation. That's it.
Okay. Councilmember Howell?
I am interested in Eastside Transportation and Arch and the Y Board.
Councilmember Gamblin?
Yeah, I'm not in a position right at the moment to indicate that, but I can do it within a couple of days.
Councilmember Moran?
Okay, well, first, FAC cannot be on there as a list because that's picked amongst the members of Eastside Fire. So the board members pick their FAC. So that should not be on there. Eastside Fire.
Any others, or is that it?
Nope, that's it.
Okay. I'm happy to stay on the Kokanee Working Group. And I think the Salmon Recovery Council, the Riot 8, dovetails well with that as well. So I can put my name there as well. Council, we do need alternates and members in all of these. So, in the event that, Arch looks easy, Karen's expressed interest there, Karen Howe. So we can put Councilmember Howe there, but we do need an alternate there in the event that she's unable to make that meeting. Likewise, Eastside Fire and Rescue, we need.
I'll do alternate. I'll do alternate for Arch.
Okay, great. Thank you. So if we can get Amy Lamb and Arch.
I would do alternate for Eastside Fire and Rescue.
Thank you, Karen. Is there anyone that's interested in the alternate position for ETP?
I am. Kaylee, sorry.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Clark.
Christy, when does Kokanee Work Group, when do they usually meet?
It's a quarterly meeting, so they only meet 4 times a year, so it's a pretty easy one.
And is it night? Do they meet at night?
No, it's I want to say it's around like 3 in the afternoon-ish.
It's 2 to 4 p.m.
2 to 4 p.m. And do you know, Mike, if that's on a Wednesday?
It's the 4th Wednesday of each quarter.
Okay, I can do that one as an alternate.
Perfect.
Because not always though, Christy, because I sometimes have to do training on Wednesdays from 1 to 4, but that's also kind of hit and miss. How about the Salmon Recovery Council? When's that one meet?
I don't know about that one. I wasn't on that one last time.
That meets 2 to 4:15 p.m. on the third Thursday of every other month.
No, I can't do that.
Yeah, and for East Side Fire, it is the second Thursday of the month, and it is at 4 o'clock, 4 to 5.
Is there anyone else that would be interested in just being the alternate for Riot 8? Councilmember Gamble, is there any way we can put your name in there as an alternate for Riot 8, or is it premature for you to
Yeah, it's just premature. I'll know here pretty quickly, but right now it's premature. Sorry.
Okay, well, we'll hold off on that since it's an alternate, but this just became very easy. And so I think given that there is, a good mix of folks on here and we've got a spot for everybody, is if I would entertain a motion to move this one wholesale.
Well, who's the alternate on pick?
Oh, that's right. We do need to figure out who the, excuse me, you're right. We need to figure out that. So if you and Councilmember Lamb can either discuss it here on the merits or we can vote.
Amy, I've been the alternate, but Christy was the chair. So it wasn't too hard to be the alternate on that particular group because she was pretty much at every meeting except I think one the whole year. So I'll be the alternate again. Because you're the alternate on the region, on the arch.
Sure.
And then I'm already on transportation.
Sounds good.
I'll be at the meeting still, Amy. You'll be the voting member.
Councilmember Moran, you have your hand up. Did you have, okay, no. All right. I'd entertain a motion to move this and you can make a motion to move to adopt these as our committee members for 2022.
I move that we adopt this list as our 2022 members.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, ayes have it. We have our 2022 committee members. Mike, if you wouldn't mind just emailing that out to all of us, just so we have it.
Absolutely, I will get this out later this week.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, council, it is 9:51. We do have council reports and executive session left to go. Are there any council reports? I know not a lot's happened since December because
I do have a city manager report when you get to it, Mayor.
Okay, we make sure there's no council members with reports before we move on. Nope. All right, Mr. City Manager, you have a report?
Thank you. I wanted to take a moment and speak to the council and community regarding some of the things that are going on with snow and ice removal as a starter. The city's #1 priority is to keep our designated priority snow and ice routes in good driving condition and safe. Our crews have worked 24 hours a day during the storm events and are currently working 12-hour shifts. It may be a while before residential streets are served due to staffing shortages, as we've had staff turnover and illness. We've got materials such as sand, salt, and de-icer are in short supply regionally and statewide. Our staff has been working very hard with its vendors to get our orders fulfilled. And then we've had some unforeseen equipment issues. We've had our mechanic on site a significant amount of the time to help reblade and work on our snowplows and equipment. During the snow and ice events, the city refocuses our facilities and parks maintenance team to help out our street maintenance teams to clear snow and ice from the roads. It takes a full team effort from both departments. So our crews have been working constantly since December 5th to keep the priority routes usable. I know it's been frustrating for some of our folks in some of our neighborhoods, but our crews have been working very, very diligently and hard, long shifts. Due to the continuing forecast, it is likely our storm response will continue for several more days and serving our priority routes first before the neighborhoods. On garbage and recycling, due to the hazardous conditions, Republic has not been able to collect residential garbage and recycling and yard waste last week. Customers may be put out double your regular, or maybe putting out double the regular materials due to miscollection at no charge, and Republic will pick it up. And again, this week, that's what we're looking at in some neighborhoods. If your garbage is not collected this week, you may put out triple the regular material next week. We're working with Republic Services, and we will have 2 areas open tomorrow. Republic Services will offer 2 drop sites here in the city for garbage and recycling starting tomorrow, Wednesday, at the following times and locations. Beaver Lake Park, Wednesday, January 5th through Friday, January 7th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's the ball fields area, staff is telling me. And East Sammamish Park is the other location, Wednesday, 1 to 5 from 9:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. And if weather conditions require it, it'll be Thursday on January 6th and Friday, January 7th from 9:30 to 2:30. Please note that East Sammamish, yes, excuse me 1 second. Okay, please note that East Sammamish Park is also utilized as a school drop-off location for Margaret Mead students, and we are working around the school bell times. Should there be any school delays or closures, hours at this location may be affected. Sorry, it took me a bit to pre-read that and understand it. Regarding parks, the city's snow and ice policies for parks have been to keep all parks closed while the entire park maintenance crews are redirected to plowing the streets during the snow event. Once the event has stopped and roads are safe, the parks and facilities will be reopened after the driveways and parking lots are cleared and are inspected for safety. Then another issue we have ongoing, public records. The city's public records employee unexpectedly had to take leave for a few months. So we are currently responding to public records requests by filling in with other staff. As those staff have existing job responsibilities, it will take longer for the city to produce public records for the foreseeable future. We ask for the public's patience with our existing staff as public records requests continue to increase. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Just to clarify, on the Beaver Lake Park, you said that's Wednesday through Friday. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. But go ahead, Scott. Do you have something more to add? No, that's correct.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. Council, I had one thought right before we run back, and we are going to need to extend the meeting before we run back into executive session. I wondered if maybe a mini retreat might not be advisable. I think I ran into our deputy city manager and our city manager with Councilmember Howe, and there was some discussion about maybe a retreat being in March with the hopes of it being in person. I guess my personal concern is that might be too far out. I think we're a brand new council, and I think it would be healthy for us to get to know each other in that setting. And while I realize that setting will be a remote one, given the Omicron variant, I think it might be important for us to have a discussion amongst ourselves, just to hear what everyone's priorities are. And then if we can't have a full retreat until March, if that is indeed still the plan, maybe a mini retreat of just, a handful of hours might help to kind of wage that first quarter of the year if there's opportunity for council to weigh in on the tasks ahead, but then also just an opportunity for us to have a more leisurely place to discuss. And because it's a public meeting and all 7 of us will be there, obviously then the public can watch too and give public comment. Thoughts? No thoughts?
I think it sounds great. I don't know what we have to do, like what the.
Well, I mean, we can make a formal motion to it. I think the other half of that question is on the staff side. I understand there's an imposition if we ask staff to, put together a mini retreat, but I think if nothing else, a mini retreat could just be an opportunity for the 7 of us to have a discussion. And that's not something that we can sit here and just have a casual conversation during a council meeting. And that I think that might be helpful for all of us to get to know one another a little bit better, since we're all sitting behind computer screens. And while that will still be the case, I think it lends itself well to hearing what other council members are wanting to accomplish in their time here. Councilmember Howe?
I would agree. We would try to make it as lightweight as possible for staff so that it wasn't such a burden. Just a simple framework, actually, that we could even probably copy off someone else's website. Just use that. And I think all we need is a moderator, potentially. That's it.
Councilmember Lamb?
I would support a mini retreat. That would be really great. Between now and March is, a ways off. And I think there's quite a bit of things that I think we'd all like to discuss.
Mr. City Manager, is there time on the schedule where, I think given the short notice, I don't know that we're going to be able to find a moderator that's external to the city? Is there time and availability for someone on staff to provide that for council? I just think we need the opportunity for the 7 of us to chat.
Let us take a look at that. I'm going to turn it over to Scott. He's been coordinating with our facilitator. Scott, can you help the mayor and council with that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Council Scott McCall, Deputy City Manager. Happy to reach out to our facilitator and see if there is a time between now and then. I think, as the mayor will recall, the reason for trying to do that was to hopefully be able to do it in person. So if we can try to figure out a mini version in the meantime, we're happy to try to get that set up. I guess I would ask council, since they're all here at the moment, when is a good day and time that might work for you? And then we'll see what might be available with the facilitator.
I'll just start at the top. Deputy Mayor Clark, you want to weigh in on times that work for you? I wouldn't exclude the weekends. I know that's also an imposition for staff, but I think given other constraints, the weekend may be an opportune time. It's when we've done them previously. So
yeah, Fridays or weekends.
Yeah. Councilmember Lamb?
Fridays.
Councilmember Treen?
The only weekend that I can't do it is the easy way for me to do this. I won't be available on the 29th of January, which is a Saturday.
Would you be available on a Friday?
I don't. Can I contact my wife and ask her what she's going to do for my birthday? Friday, yeah, probably the 28th.
Okay. Councilmember Moran?
I have a medical procedure on the 24th, and I'm probably going to be out for a couple weeks, 2+. So that's about the best I can tell you. Anything after that, I'm probably good.
Okay. Councilmember Gamblin?
Yeah, I have weekdays are really tough now, work-wise, so I have weekends available.
So we don't exactly have a consensus for you.
Madam Mayor, if I may, I think what we'll do is we will try to put together a proposal for you all, and we will reach out to the facilitator that we have on board for the full retreat and see what we can put together and try to come up with a date and run it all by everybody and see what we can conjure up that will hopefully meet your needs.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, council members, I need an extension for the meeting. Given that we have the executive session left, I might suggest extending to 11 just to cover us so we don't have to come back out and re-extend the full meeting.
I move we extend our meeting until 11 p.m. tonight.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
I'm not sure if I heard Councilmember Moran. I think it was a 6-1.
I'm a nay as well.
Extend to 11. I don't know that the executive session needs to span that time frame. Should we say 30 minutes? Does that sound adequate? We can always extend our executive session.
I'll amend and say, can we extend our meeting for 30 minutes?
No, our meeting's going to 11. We need to
extend.
We don't know. We've extended. We just extended the meeting to 11. I'm just suggesting 30 minutes for executive session and asking if you think that's sufficient. We can extend that later. Okay, let's just put that there. So again, you'll use the other link that you were sent for executive session.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor.
Yes, I will cite the RCW. Don't worry.
Thank you. And then also, please announce whether council expects to take any action following the executive session.
That I don't know. It is possible we might take action. That would depend on what the discussion is back there.
So will the council be reconvening in open session following the executive session?
Absolutely. We'd have to.
Now I get it.
We'd have to close the meeting anyway. So.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is, says executive session is litigation and pending litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)I and evaluation complaints brought against a public employee pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)F. So we'll see you over in executive session.
This is the Sammamish City Council. The Sammamish City Council is going to extend executive session for another 20 minutes until 10:55 p.m. Again, executive session is extended until 10:55 p.m.
Okay, we've got a quorum of council members. Let's see Councilmember Treen yet. But it looks like Councilmember Gamlin's still connecting to audio here. Let's let him at least get connected on audio. Okay, he's on. All right. Then entertain a motion to extend the meeting.
Second.
We need a time, so we need an actual motion to extend.
So sorry.
Okay.
Motion to extend to 11:30.
So if we move to 11:30, just for your edification, that would mean we'd have everything in 30 minutes. We'd have to go back into executive session and come back out and adjourn the meeting unless we're going to extend again. So
Then I would say midnight. Motion to extend executive session to midnight.
Second. Not executive session, just the meeting.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of extending the meeting till midnight, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
All right, by a vote of 4-3, we'll be extending to midnight. So now we need to go back into executive session, and I think we'll be in executive session for, I'll say 11:30. So see you back over there in executive session link.
We'll be extending executive session. We'll be extending executive session for an additional 15 minutes. So extending executive sessions for additional 15 minutes until 11:50. So extending executive session until 11:50. Thank you.
So while it's almost 11:50, we'll need to make sure that Lita tells us that they're back rolling with the cameras before.
Yes, I believe he's back there and should be ready to go.
Okay, perfect. So it's 11:50, so we can go. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Oh.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Good night, folks.
Good night.